must not podcast. Podcast is the mind killer. Podcast is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my podcast. I will let it pass over me and through me. And when it is past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where it has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's what you got to do.
It's what you have to do. Except, I mean, you were running a couple lines before we started recording.
Are you talking to me? Am I allowed to
I'm
talk?
talking to you. Well, please talk.
Hi.
Hi. I feel like that you were doing a very good impression of a line reading from this film that you could also slot.
You were doing Kenneth
podcast
McMillan?
into.
Kenneth McMillan is Baron
Yes.
Well, in this movie, Baron Harkonnen.
Sure. What's
Not
the
Harkonnen.
difference?
In the new movies,
okay.
is Harkonnen.
Which I think is correct.
I
Is it
don't
or
know
is-
if there's a correct.
Historically accurate.
It's, I guess, right. It's like, do we go by how did Frank Herbert say it? Or do we go by like, how linguistically should this be said, written out, right? These made up words. I don't know.
I mean, it's thousands of years in the future.
Oh.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, we don't
in the
know
future.
yet.
Well, which do you prefer?
I think I default to Harkonnen
Mm.
just because that's what I grew up
Yes.
hearing,
Mhm.
having seen David Lynch's 1984 Dune,
The film Dune.
the topic of this discussion today.
Celebrating its
many times.
its 40th anniversary.
40th anniversary.
It's pretty wild for this movie to be hitting 40 in a year where a Dune movie is seen as the great triumph of the American commercial cinema.
the savior of theatrical presentation.
It is still the highest grossing film of the year as of this moment. I mean, I guess
I think that, right,
the
that
time we were
record will
recording,
soon fall.
Inside Out 2 will surpass it.
Without a doubt, but it is the number one film of 2024 in June, in mid-June.
Held on to it for 6 months.
Yeah, it made 282 million domestic, 711 worldwide.
And all year people have been like, oh, why can't we have more Dunes?
Yeah.
If we had a couple more Dunes this year,
Well, people finally figured it out. Dune's got the spice.
Dune's got the spice.
And he who controls the spice controls the universe. Spit, spit, spit,
I thought
spit.
you were going to put podcast in there, not trying to...
No, but I mean, I was spacing out because I was enjoying the litany against fear, which you were referring to.
Yes, absolutely.
One
Yes.
of the many self-soothing recitations
Yeah.
that the characters of Dune say to themselves rather than move the plot along.
Here's another thing.
I used to recite that to myself in high school before tests.
The litany against fear.
Hype
I
yourself
would.
up.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's still valuable to me when I'm combating anxiety or fear of
Do
ambiguity.
you still do it?
I do, but I can never remember it all the way through.
Okay. You used to have it verbatim.
Nah, never actually. I get hung up on I will let the fear pass through me.
Mm.
And when it is gone, I will turn and where the fear went,
It's-
only I will remain or something. That's where I get hung up.
I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me.
Right,
And
over
when
me
it
and
has
through
gone
me.
past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path.
I really have a very distinct memory of trying to memorize that. In
It's,
the Harvard stop on the Red Line in Harvard Square. I was going to go visit a friend there or something. And
I will tell you, it's one of my favorite...
when I was in high school, I should say.
I will say this, non-hyperbolically. I want to say it's one of my favorite moments in podcasting, period, is when you brought your dear friend of the podcast, past and future guest, David Rees,
Oh, yeah.
on Doughboys.
Yeah.
Very kind of you to welcome, you're connecting friends.
We were promoting Dicktown at the
You were?
time, which is still available on Hulu.
Hey,
Get
and
your plugs in early.
depending on
everyone.
what subscription service you have, maybe watchable on Disney+.
Always be plugging, I say, or in the spirit of David Lynch's Dune, always be heart plugging.
Very true.
What's your favorite moment?
You brought David Rees onto Doughboys. He did not know the show well. He did not know them. You were sort of making this connection.
Yeah.
I forget how it happens, but at some point he makes some side swipe at how bored he was by Denis Villeneuve's Dune
Uh-huh.
and said something to the effect of like, what is this? None of this, I don't understand what any of this is. And you just went, I can tell you exactly what it is. And then just like launched into what clearly was still the effects of you having memorized a bunch of stuff as a child.
I know, but
You
then
started like laying out the map of explaining how the world works.
the world's...
Yes, I'm
this
sorry.
is a multi-planetary epic
That's
Just
story.
the idea of someone being that close a friend of yours and someone you've worked with for so long,
Right.
taking such a fucking hit at a thing that you love so dearly,
Oh.
and basically framed it as like, this is impenetrable. No one could understand this.
That's the Reesian way, though.
Yes.
Like, I don't think he would have said that if he didn't know that I already loved it.
Right.
Yes.
But
That's the Reesian jihad.
your deepest heart song is the worlds of Dune in many ways.
Is it?
Is that kind
Wait.
of true? I feel like
What's the podcast? Who's our guest? Wait a sec.
this is
Okay.
Blank Check with Griffin and David. It's a podcast about filmographies.
Wait, which one of you is Griffin?
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks, make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce baby. This is a mini-series on the films of David Lynch. It is called Twin Pods Fire Cast With Me. Today we are talking about his biggest bounce. He has a couple bounces, but the scale of
No.
this.
There is absolutely no
incomparable.
competition. What would possibly be the competition?
There are other ones. The fucking Firewalk With Me.
Yeah, I guess the other argument for the bounce, right, is like Twin Peaks getting away from him.
Yes.
But no. Dune is obviously, that's the definition of a bounce for us because it's the moment where he's like, I must
Yes.
reorient my career so
Correct.
this doesn't happen
That's
to
the
me
big
again.
thing.
Fire Walk With Me, he's like, I made the movie I wanted to make. I'm sorry, nobody
Well,
liked
that's
it.
And Peter
that's
came back
the
to
thing
direct it.
about
Right.
David
Yeah.
Lynch and Dune, which is that this is the one that got away from him.
This is the one that
This
got
is
away
the
from
one
him.
of his movies that he hates.
bears the pain for that apparently to this day.
Yes.
Like,
the
he's
week we are
extremely sad
recording this
about it.
episode, there's a new news cycle of some quote he gave in a recent interview.
Yeah.
Of like, I died on that movie and I don't think
Right.
I've ever fully recovered.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Although,
It was very, very painful for him to. I mean, it was an
Recently-
uncomfortable shoot.
Yeah.
Many weeks. All right.
Yeah, you want to make a movie in
But-
the desert, it's going to suck.
I have a theory that we can get into later. That perhaps why. I mean, he says it's because he didn't get final cut, which
Yeah.
is understandable.
Which
But
is
there's
also
more to it than that. There's a
astounding.
very clear, deep wound that he
Sure.
feels about this movie.
Rewatching this again just this morning, right before record.
Sure.
Hadn't seen this film in 20 years. I
An
want to
easy
say.
2 hours and 17 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly watched it on TV, 4:3 standard
Oh.
definition.
Mm.
I'm
Did you
trying to
see the
remember if it
Alan
would
Yeah,
have
I
been
was going to say, which
That's my
version did you
question.
see?
I think I might have seen the extended television version.
Yes. Which is just nonsense, I think.
I've never,
Right.
I've never seen it.
It's not like an extended version in any real sense. It's just they just put shit in it. I think
Right.
it's quite odd, right? Like
We
what they
talked
did.
about this
Right.
Waterworld episode behind the paywall, but this for a very long time, especially with like a big expensive movies like this.
Yeah.
If your movie had an odd running time, it wasn't a clean half-hour end time.
Mm-hmm.
The studio would just, without the permission of the director, be like, here's all the deleted scenes we have that are finished that you can just put in narrative order that makes
Right.
this movie totally shapeless and formless, but
But you'll
allows
hit
you
your
to
time.
have it. Now it's a 3-hour block instead of it being weirdly under 2-hour block. You either cut it down or you add a bunch. And Lynch hated them doing that so much that he demanded his name be taken off the TV version.
He's right. They should
Yeah.
have done that. It was uncool of them.
But I think that's what I had seen.
Sure.
Well,
Okay.
he had originally wanted the film to be like about 3 hours.
We'll
Yeah.
talk about
Oh,
that.
all right.
But
We
it's,
will
that's
get
not his
to
3
all
hours.
of that.
But I
Okay,
was
right.
going to say, watching it today,
Yeah.
knowing that he disowns it and felt like he didn't have final control, it is fascinating how much this movie still thoroughly has the editing rhythms of a David Lynch film.
It's 100%
Mhm.
a David Lynch movie. I
yeah.
think he overstates that.
Yeah.
He wanted to make a sequel to this movie. Like, he was not making this movie being like, oh God, what a disaster. Let me get me as far away from this as possible.
Right.
Like, he didn't like how it turned out and he didn't like what they did to it. But like, you know, yes, this is a David Lynch movie. And
Through and through.
the quote that we really should do is "The sleeper must awaken," which is like
Okay.
his most important quote in this movie because he made that up, right?
Mm.
Like, that's the thing where when you hear it, which is it's the line I associate with this movie, and I think I saw this movie first before I read Dune. And that
Interesting.
may or may not be true. Like when I was a teenager,
Mhm.
and then I read Dune, and I was like, "Why does nobody say the sleeper must awaken?" Then you realize, like, no,
Not in there.
that's Lynch. That's the transcendental,
TM.
meditative boy reading Dune.
That's David Lynch TM,
And
meaning
that's what
trademark
speaks
and
to him.
transcendental meditation.
Exactly.
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
like,
TM.
that's what's going on with Paul. Like, that's how I'm, relating to this as he reads this book. He cares about this material. It's just, It's a weird result. We'll talk about it.
It's a weird
There's a
result.
lot of stuff I love about it, but it's a weird result.
Eventually, we'll talk about it.
get
You let
to
me
We're
know.
gonna talk about
You
it,
let me
okay,
know.
John?
You let me
let's
know.
make a
Can we
commitment.
talk about? I thought we were gonna go Club Random mode.
Okay. We were talking.
Ben has sunglasses on
Ben
indoors
has
right now.
sunglasses
There are
on.
no windows.
What
in
am
our
I supposed to
podcast.
do with this fat ass sandworm?
He's got a fat ass. He's smoking.
It's a sandworm pre-roll.
Yeah.
But it's like a stop motion sandworm, and it moves kind of slowly. Like, yeah.
Ben's gone full random. Our guest today,
I don't know. Just imagining.
dear
like-
friend of the show,
Yes. Okay. Our
gosh.
guest. Yes.
co-creator, star of Dicktown, now streaming.
Co-star and co-creator of Dicktown, I like to say still streaming
Still
on Hulu.
streaming on Hulu and also Disney Plus, and also Disney Plus stars, depending on where you live and what subscription you have.
Yeah. And host of the Judge John Hodgman podcast every week on MaximumFun.org.
I want to say something else about. Well, have you said his name? Obviously, he just said his name as part of the show he hosts.
I haven't yet. I should also mention, I know this is a great shame of yours. His book Vacation Land is only available in hardback. You can only get it in the firmest
No, but that's not
of form
true.
factors. John, if it were available in
The
paperback,
thickest, largest book.
if it were library edition only, if it were available in paperback, I would have heard about it by now. With all due respect, you're a good friend, and I do think I would have heard
What? Well,
if
I know.
Vacation Land
That's
were
what-
available in
That's
paperback.
what makes me so excited to announce right
What?
here.
What?
For the very first time, Vacation Land is available in paperback
Oh my
wherever
God.
you get books, as is my other book, Medallion Status.
But can I get it with
John
like kind of
Hodgman.
like John
hello.
Hodgman's
Gentleman
here.
John Hodgman.
Can I get it with like plastic wrapping around the cover?
Oh.
You know what I mean?
A real crinkly
yeah,
dust.
crinkles.
Dust guard.
like a library edition.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
see. I'll cook one up for you.
Here's the other thing, John Hodgman. This is
Yes,
your
David
fifth
Sims.
episode.
Oh.
As a full-time guest on a main feed episode. You have sort of dropped in
A Coraline.
a couple other times,
Yeah.
such as on our Coraline
A couple
episode.
of cameos.
You had a
The-
couple voicemails.
Did they live?
I've Jack
The
Nanced a couple
voicemails?
of them.
You've nanced it. You've
Poked
nanced
my
it.
head in.
You watched Avengers Infinity War with us once,
That's
which was
true.
funny because you had watched it the night before thinking we were just going to discuss
I
it.
didn't realize it was a watch along.
Well,
I think
really
about that
bad
a lot.
about that.
Mistake.
But
That
that's
was
okay. I
early
didn't
in the
mind.
format.
I had a really good time.
Okay, wait a second.
And by the way, when you say full-time guest, I only wish it were true. I wish this were my
You were here
full-time
all the
job.
time.
John!
I
Honestly,
wish this were my
you know what,
full-time
John?
You're
job.
too kind.
You're hired. Just
You know
come on
what?
board. Who cares?
And you know what, in fact,
You want to get in this gumbo?
David and I are taking a sabbatical.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, it's
Have
your
fun.
show.
Oh, all right.
And we're going to collect all the checks.
Yes.
FYI.
It's a pure licensing play.
I'm going to pay you an honorarium.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, of course. I like it when they call it an honorarium. And
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm like, you mean money? And they're like, yeah, money.
Tip of
And
the
I'm like,
hat.
okay.
Yeah, it feels
sure.
a little,
I'm honored.
sus.
You're
Ed
trying.
Wood.
I'll buy the franchise. All right, go ahead.
A master builder, which people often cite as maybe our best episode ever.
An incredible day.
A major day. Evil Dead 2.
Yes, that's true.
This is 5. What's the fourth one I'm forgetting?
Buster Keaton,
Steamboat Bill
College,
Jr.
and Steamboat Bill Jr.
Yeah.
Double feature.
Yeah. A big 5.
But you know what?
What?
Master Builder being the biggest.
I'm thrilled to be here, but I've also never been more terrified.
Why?
Well, so this is what I was going
This
to say.
is such, I mean,
It's
you
it's
know,
a big movie for
tough
you.
this is the unrecordable. As much as Dune was the
Yeah.
unfilmable novel,
Yes.
this is the unrecordable podcast for me. It is too massive a topic, and I don't want to. There's so
if you
much.
just want to
Yes.
just go quiet,
Emotionally,
stop
I-
speaking.
I'm not saying that there's too much to discuss.
Right.
There's just enough to discuss. It's
Yeah,
fine. Like there's-
spice.
you know what I mean? Spice.
I just feel like this has always been,
but
in
it's
our
a very
friendship,
very big emotional topic for me.
one of the things I have heard you invoke the most often. And
Yeah,
the
I
most
just sort of
passionately.
know this about you that
And-
this
and
movie is
branching-
important to you.
Frank Herbert's Dune, the world of,
Yeah.
and then specifically largely within that also,
Yeah.
the Lynch film.
Yeah.
How major both are for you.
Well, I have only ever read Dune.
Okay.
I have never read any of the other books.
Interesting.
Because I have read some synopses of those,
Mhm.
and they seem too weird even for
John?
me.
John,
John?
it's time for you to read the other books. I'm doing it right now.
Really?
It's great.
Really?
I'm having an amazing time.
Where are you at?
I'm in Chapter House. I'm in the last
Whoa.
Herbert book. I'll admit the
How
final
many thousands of years does that take place in after Dune?
quite a few.
Like,
yes. I mean, the fact that, not to spoil things, but to speak in the broadest of
Mm.
terms, Dune Messiah is a direct sequel to Dune. Children of Dune is about the children of the people in Dune. So you're still basically
Sure.
like
It's
And
like
then-
Dune babies.
Right. And then
Yeah.
God Emperor of Dune is like, okay, 3,000 years later. And you're like, what? And then Heretics of Dune is like, okay, more thousands of years after that.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, who are the characters? And they'll be like, well, this guy, his name is like Blark, but he kind of looks like King Leto, Duke Leto. So
Right.
kind of think of him as a Duke Leto
Sure.
type. Like it starts doing that to you.
And Duncan Idaho comes back in
Duncan
several
Idaho
cloned forms,
Is
right?
in every single book.
Wow.
If there is a
Wow.
Dune book, Duncan Idaho is coming out of a clone tank being like, what is it now? And they're like, hello, welcome. It's the year 8 billion.
One of the top names in science fiction, right? Because like
Duncan Idaho is a great name.
it truly sounds like he picked that out of a two names out of a bingo ball of potential names.
I hope he like took a whole day by the pool after he wrote down Duncan Idaho. Been like, I'm not topping that today.
Yeah.
I'm
Because
gonna
one of
go
the
like
like Duncan Idaho, because Dune takes place 10,000 years,
Sure.
not in our future.
Mm.
10,000 years
After the
after the
Butler and
forming
Jihad.
of the Spacing Guild or something.
correct.
So many thousand years into our future plus 10,000.
Yes.
And yet it's this whole incredible, I mean, this is what makes the book so addictive, spice-like addictive, is the world building that goes into this, where it is this massive cultural mishmash of
Multural.
words. Multural.
I like that word.
Yeah.
It's a multural mishmash.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a multural
Multural
mishmash
crisscross.
of words and concepts and religious concepts
Yes,
and sociological
which I think
concepts.
is daunting to
Right.
some new readers or whatever.
Yeah, but when you get to the name, and so there's a guy named Paul. Fine, I
Right,
get it.
right.
And there's a
Jessica.
Jessica.
Certain
These are all
names.
real names. But when you
Right.
get Duncan Idaho, you're
You're
like,
like,
how did we get here? To me, there is at least 20,000 years of future history, and how we get to Duncan Idaho as a name.
I'd like to Duncan Idaho right now. Just sounds like a thing
Just
you
sounds
could
great.
do.
Just
You'd
love
like
it.
to dunk an Idaho?
It feels like it's sort of
Yeah.
like I'm dipping a cookie
yeah.
in something.
Dunkin' Donuts should do a spin-off.
They
Or,
should
like,
do
they
like
should
a
do a
Momoa,
partnership.
like that you
I was
can
going to
dunk.
say, I mean, here's the thing.
How did that not happen?
I know, it's crazy.
This is the only
was
guy who's
right
thinking
there.
money over here.
Ben's always
only thinking
money.
money.
He's got that grindset
he's
mindset.
random.
Hey, that's just how I am, baby.
Yeah. You were peeping
Always
the
got the
friendlies
dollar
hat.
signs on my
Yeah,
mind.
when Ben
First
walked in with
thing-
his friendlies hat, I
Yeah.
was like, "Can I? I'm going to say a swear."
Mm.
I was like, "Jesus cock, that's a hot hat."
You said Jesus, and I was like, you really don't have to pre-apologize for that.
But then,
cock.
boom.
Yeah.
Sorry
May I
about
use
that.
that quote in my marketing materials?
Jesus cock, that's a
John
hot hat.
Hodgman.
Please do. Please do. That's incredible.
Duncan Idaho is a name, right? You're just like,
It's a great name.
who could ever embody that?
Right.
Lynch tried. And he's not a guy I like all the time. But Jason Momoa, if he had any other name in the world,
Other
it
than-
would be Duncan Idaho.
Yeah, Duncan Idaho.
He just fits that so
He made-
fucking
He
perfect.
made a lot of sense.
Richard Jordan as Duncan Idaho doesn't make a huge impression in 1980.
One of my
David Lynch's
least.
1984
I like Richard Jordan as an actor.
Yeah.
He's amazing in what's it called? Friends of Eddie Coyle, which is
Yeah.
a movie I love, and he's lots of
Come
stuff.
to Red October.
I was just going to say,
Yeah,
are you telling me you lost another submarine?
Logan's Run, right? He's in that. Like he's a guy, great
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
There are several bits of casting in this movie that I'm kind of like fine with, but
Mhm.
he's one of the ones where I'm like, there's no oomph to this. What's the matter?
No, isn't this guy supposed to be fun?
Right. And kind of like mega charismatic and,
Right.
everyone loves Duncan Idaho. It's the whole point. That's
Right.
why they send him first.
He
On
just looks
paper-
like your Irish uncle who got sober about 15 years ago,
Yes.
and he's like really white knuckling it.
On
Not all of
paper, not telling me what project this is for, just listing the actors and being like, this is the cast of a David Lynch movie. I'm like, holy fucking shit. Perfect. Right? I want to
Right.
see him work with all of these people.
Sure.
Uh-huh.
At
Some of
least-
these names, like Linda Hunt or whatever.
Right.
Right.
At
right.
least half of them are misapplied or
In one
in
scene.
the setup of the movie make no impact.
Like, who are you thinking of?
I think Linda Hunt makes no impact when that should be a slam dunk.
It's not a huge role.
Right.
Yes.
No.
Jordan's a perfect example, one that just like doesn't fucking work at all. I mean, the ones that work are like, I feel. I mean, look, we'll be talking. We cannot
As,
do this episode.
as David Sims would say, we're going to talk about it.
We're going to talk about it. We cannot do this episode without comparing this movie to the Villeneuve films, which are experiencing this fucking like victory lap of
Yeah.
like, holy shit, this guy pulled off twice the thing that
Okay.
everyone had said for decades.
Was not possible.
Right. And I think you look at the way he cast those movies, and there's a lot of really smart strategic casting.
Yeah.
Of like, this is not literal, but I need to fill this movie with faces that are really comforting to audiences. People who are just kind
shortcut
of like
casting.
Shortcut casting.
Javier Bardem walks in and people are like, I get what this is.
Right,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And the same way you're like, maybe the character as written isn't obviously a Jason Momoa type, but Jason Momoa will give the energy that needs in a movie that doesn't have 2 hours to spend with this guy.
Right. As opposed to the David Lynch approach to casting, which is let's find the weirdest looking character actors we can
Faces.
and then put boils on them.
Which usually works for his movies because very often those people just have to represent energy.
Sure.
This movie, and I want to make it clear, I like this film a lot.
Yeah.
It played so much better for me on this watch. Unsurprisingly, for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
I do think there's something to like, this thing has been adapted well now. There is a pressure off of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think watching it now, having seen the Villeneuve movies, not having read the books, I'm like, it's easier for me to track what's going on in the plot of this movie because I can keep relating it back to the movie that is more narratively functional.
Sure. Look.
But it looks incredible. But like Sting is an example of like Lynch doing the smart kind of casting.
Right. Everyone wants to see Sting walk out of that steam bath.
Totally.
With his winged codpiece.
Sting is great in this movie, but I always forget that he is in this movie for 5 minutes.
Barely.
Like, I think of him so, like, I think of him in an outsized way in this film, and it's really like 2 scenes.
And especially when part
right?
2 of the Villeneuve is all built around that character.
'cause
Like, this is what we've been
what
saving.
All right.
Right.
So I've only ever read Dune, as I mentioned.
Okay.
But
Read it at what age?
Well, here's the thing. In terms of my experience of David Lynch's Dune,
Mm-hmm.
it is an epic story
Mm-hmm.
encompassing multiple different books of my experience,
Okay.
beginning with a prologue.
Mm-hmm.
I go to my mom's nursing school reunion at Yale,
Humble brag.
and that's right. I
Talk about Club Random.
had a great mom who was a nurse.
That's wonderful.
She went to Yale Nursing School,
Must be
and
nice.
we went one summer reunion, 1984, summer of 1984.
Okay.
I know this movie's coming out. I've got nothing to do at this nursing school reunion other than lie around in a dorm room and try to read Dune.
How old are you in 1984? What are we talking about?
I'm
here?
turning 13.
Perfect age. And
Nail it.
you know of Dune. It's a best-selling sci-fi work. You certainly have heard of Dune.
Yes. And I know that the movie is coming out,
Yep.
and that's why I feel
it's
like
much hyped.
because I've always been a science fiction and fantasy film and television nerd,
Mhm.
but in terms of book learning, I was not as deep into it as I might
But
have been.
here is a film being positioned as a major cultural event.
Sure.
This movie is released with the energy of, here you go, here's the new Star Wars.
Right.
And not only that, the messaging of, this is one of the things that inspired Star Wars. This is the real shit.
Yeah. And I'm also a pretentious only child.
So I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Lynch was on your radar already. At
Of
this point.
course.
Okay.
Yeah, of
Big.
course.
Man was
Yeah.
a big
I
release.
don't think I had seen Eraserhead
Mhm.
yet, but I definitely was aware and maybe had seen Elephant Man.
Mhm.
And I knew that he was a really interesting director. And Dune is this long reputation as
Mhm.
being a very thinky book.
Which, music to your ears, I assume.
I got very thinky ears. So I'm trying to read this thing
Mhm.
in my deep study,
Mhm.
and I find it unfucking penetrable. Set it aside,
Yeah.
and I'm like, Dad, take me to go see Ghostbusters, which came out that summer.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember from that period of time.
Look, this is kind of an infamous summer of just like pure pleasure blockbuster movies.
Right. Beverly Hills Cop, we just covered that
Gremlins,
one. That's in 84.
like these
Gremlins.
movies that just like fucking hit and just go down easily for everyone.
Right.
Yes.
And I put Dune aside, having read maybe 2 chapters,
Okay.
barely being able to understand what was going on,
mhm.
I would
and
say,
very little, not knowing at all that this movie was going to entwine itself with my life for decades.
Dune the book, while largely readable, I would say,
Yeah.
does not hold your hand at the start, and instead is kind of just like, let's just plunge your head into the ice.
It throws your hand into a box and causes pain
That's
immediately.
very true.
That's the opening scene.
And it throws a lot of words at you that are not English, essentially, such as Kwisatz Haderach, right? Where you're
Yeah.
just like, what Gom Jabbar? What is this?
Yeah.
Bene Gesserit. And you're just kind of like, I think I had the same experience of like, I need to put this down. I can't like read this in a relaxed way.
And
I need to read this with a dictionary or something.
Yeah. And may I plug once more, heart plug once more?
I'll allow it.
All right, thank you. I do have a Substack, hodgman.substack.com.
Wow.
There is a post,
Available in paperback?
no, available only in pixels.
Okay.
There is a post titled A Secret Report to the Society.
Mm-hmm.
There is a paywall.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $5 a month.
Mhm.
You can join and then delete it.
Okay.
Beyond the paywall, there is a 37-minute recording of me reading the first chapter of Dune out loud in a thick Maine accent.
Wow.
If that's your kind of thing,
Yeah.
you can hear me talk about that Gom Jabba
Yeah.
quite a bit. But that's just a little plug.
I think
I'm thinking about the money, Ben. You see what I'm saying?
It's
think
smart.
about the money.
Trying to monetize this.
I'm seeing you hustle and I love it.
yeah, all right. Thank you very much.
When
Sorry, I threw us all off there.
No. When I
I'm-
was 9, I believe, and I'm going to say this, 9 at the absolute oldest, if not even 8.
Yeah.
My best friend in elementary school was a kid named Keir Kramlich.
Great name.
Take it back. Best science fiction name in the biz.
Kind of incredible.
Sorry, Duncan,
9 years
Idaho.
into this podcast, I've never name dropped Keir Kramlich, who I saw a lot of movies with when
Can
I
you
was a
say
child.
Sounds
slower?
like a Dune
Keir
character.
Kramlich.
Correct.
Where it's like someone comes out of a ship and is like, I am Herald of the Change, Keir Kramlich.
Keir
Yeah,
space
that's a name. Sure.
Kramlich.
I mean,
I will almost
God
definitely
bless.
get a message
Terrific.
from him when this episode comes out saying, hey, a bunch of people told me you said my name on a podcast. Haven't spoken to him in a bit. But he
What's up,
was
Keir?
voracious reader.
Yeah.
Loved sci-fi.
Yeah.
Would constantly be recommending things to me.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, this is a little bit tough.
Yeah.
Like for 8 or 9, he was pretty precocious in terms of what he was reading.
For sure.
And I remember him being like, iRobot rules.
Right.
And I was reading it and I was like, I can kind of go with this, but I also understand I'd probably be more into this if I waited 5 years.
Mhm.
He got all in on Dune, which is insane to
At
think
the
about.
age of 8 or 9.
Yes.
Wow.
9 at the absolute oldest, he was reading all of them and
Yeah.
was just like, this is the shit. And this is around the time when the Star Wars special editions have come out, maybe the year or two after that.
Mhm.
Maybe that was his bridge to it.
Right.
maybe.
But he was just sort of like, hey, we had just both gotten so Star Wars pilled and was like, you have to read this. And I remember maybe making it through half a chapter,
Right.
but just like, this is impossible. To what your point?
It's still, I mean, having
Yeah.
just read it out loud yesterday and recorded it at hodgman.substack.com,
Hey,
I can tell you that it's still pretty opaque.
yeah.
Like, I now
It's so
understand it.
good.
But
It's
I'm
the
now,
best.
I'm a, and I did end up reading the book,
The
pro-
book.
the book,
Mm.
probably 25 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I loved it when I
Yeah.
finally was ready for it. But this, it's there's a, there's a section in this opening chapter in which Paul describes his meditation practice, and it just becomes simply drug language,
This is the kind
like
of
not non-complete sentence drug language.
the
You'd
exact
like
kind
to-
of stuff that made people think for a very long time that this book was fundamentally unadaptable. Like, are
Right.
its key pleasures things that do not translate to a narrative in fixed time,
Yeah.
especially
I think
relative to the inherent costs of realizing this world.
Right.
when you watch this movie, David Lynch's Dune,
1984.
1984. And you have, yes, now seen the Denis Villeneuve films, which I want to say run probably combined about 5 hours and 15 minutes,
Mhm.
right? First one was like maybe 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I think they're both like 2.5.
Second one, I think, was a little longer. Yep. So 5 hours, 15 minutes. So
Mhm.
I was watching David Lynch's Dune and I was like, I'm just going to clock where Villeneuve cut it off,
Sure.
right?
Right.
Where Villeneuve decided to split the story in half, which
Yeah.
is basically at the end of book 1
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
books. The book is 3 books.
Which, by the way, book 1 was a complete story before
Right.
initially. He serialized in an analog magazine,
He sure did.
book 1, and then it was a couple of years before he came back and wrote book 2 and 3, also serialized before he put them together.
I think also that some of the sequels were serialized. It's how it was done back then.
That's how it was done.
It's an hour and a half into David Lynch's Dune. Is the end of Villeneuve's Dune Part 1. So,
Everything that he made the second film is contained within 45 minutes.
Correct.
Right.
Including
Correct.
credits.
And my wife was watching it with me. My wife has seen the Villeneuve movies, has no other knowledge of Dune,
Okay.
and was chortling at the point that
Yes.
suddenly Virginia Madsen's like, and then this happened, and then she took the water of life, and he did too, and let's keep it going. Where you can just get this sense of like, oh, they just have to run through the
It has
rest of
the
it.
most insane yada 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 I have ever seen in a movie, which is, by the way, they fell deeply in love. They dated for 2 years. His sister was born. She grew to maturation.
Yep.
War waged.
Things that Villeneuve was like, I think my audience can't handle at all.
Yes.
Right.
The
Not
movie
even gonna
instead
add
is
that
like,
in.
anyway, she got born, then she grew up a little bit, she could talk, she's like a talking 6-year-old. You got that? Okay, she's going to be very important. She'll have like 5 lines, but like hugely important to the plot, kills the villain. Anyway.
Respect to Alicia Witt, my
Respect
fellow
to-
Commonwealthian of Massachusetts.
Have you seen the unedited footage of her? She has a little Boston accent that they dubbed over. It is
yeah.
adorable to see footage from
didn't know
Dune
that.
84 of
No.
little Alicia Witt talking in like a masshole, like
She's from
high-pitched
Worcester
girl.
originally.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
They-
very cute.
Sims's Hall of Fame all-time crush?
I had a huge crush on Alicia Witt, specifically in Sybil,
Yes.
Oh, sure.
where she was, of course, Sybil's rude daughter.
Yes.
Did you watch Sybil?
I never did.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go fuck myself. I love to bring up
suggested
90s
no such
sitcoms
thing.
that people largely don't remember, such as Becker, and Sybil was another one, where obviously Sybil Shepherd was I'm basically Sybil Shepherd, right?
Right.
I'm this old messy
But then
actress.
Baranski ran away with it, right?
Baranski is her like martini swilling friend who's fun, and Alicia Witt is like the uptight daughter who's like, ugh, mother, like, why do you have to be
Yes.
so crazy? Like, I just want to like play concert piano or whatever.
That
She
sounds
was
like my kind of thing.
Child
she's
prodigy.
awesome in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was speaking at the age, or reading at the age of 2, playing piano concertos for David Lynch at the age of 3 or whatever.
It is
Got
just
cast in this movie.
She's a great actress.
I agree.
love
I mean, but
Alicia Witt.
I feel your affection for her. I remember
I
learning that there
want
was
to-
a young person from Massachusetts in this movie, and it wasn't me. I was a little mad about it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
This is like me with Hayden Panettiere in the voice cast of Bug's Life.
Exactly.
How dare they cast any child?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was right here,
Yeah.
even if I'm the wrong gender for this role and have no acting credits. I want to go through more of your journey to this becoming such a key text for you.
So that was the prologue among, and
Right.
when you're talking about Dune, you got to have a lot of prologues.
But sorry, you do see it in theaters
I do.
after abandoning the book like a coward.
Yeah.
This film came out in December 1984.
Right.
So it would've
now
been a
I'm
little later.
all
Right.
of 13.
Sure.
In the midst of the dead center of my 13th year.
And can I just read for comparison? A big budget film, you have to imagine and want to end up on this list. Here's Speed Round is what the top 10 highest grossing films of 1984 were. Ghostbusters, Beverly Hills Cop, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the exact amount of uncomfortable that was still tolerable
Sure.
for an audience.
Yeah.
Controversial, but not on this level, right? Then Gremlins, The Karate Kid, Police Academy, Footloose, Romancing the Stone, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, Splash. America's going straight down the middle.
That's an incredible run.
10 like good blockbusters.
Yeah.
But like that's the temperature of the audience.
Have
Where
we
do you
just
think Dune
ruined the
is?
box office game or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Where do you think Dune is on that list?
I think Dune is
I can tell
number
you.
23.
32.
That
Well,
is
you had it. Just
well,
reverse it.
Yep.
Below Teachers and Cannonball Run 2.
Yeah. not
That's
great.
the kind of stuff it
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
eclipse at the box office.
Teachers with Nick Nolte, right?
You're telling me.
The classic poster,
Is it the apple with the wick?
the Dynamite Wick.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Dynamite Wick.
I know the poster.
Also
I
a
know
great science fiction name.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Bring me Dynamite Wick.
So you,
December.
December.
December. Tim McGonigal, my old friend, and I decide we're going to go see this movie. We're both really into it.
Mhm.
My dad has known that I'm really into it. He has gotten me this book, The Making of Dune, which I still have a copy of it here.
Yes.
Maybe he gets that to me. Actually, he might have given that to me for Christmas after I saw the movie, because I remember receiving it going, this is no longer necessary for me to read. We
I no
go,
longer want to learn.
we go to see
everything.
it in Brookline Village
Mhm.
at a movie theater that isn't there anymore.
No.
My dad's friend, Fred Sabini, had picked up some moonlighting hours as a manager. He ripped our tickets, and then he handed me and Tim the famous glossary, which was
Oh,
what
sure.
Universal printed, because they were
anxious.
they were
Mhm.
a little anxious about the confusion that people would feel hearing so many different oddball terms: Fremen, Arakeen,
Well, it's very
Gamjabar,
necessary,
Gamjaba.
Because this movie has no exposition.
Yeah, right. It's not like this movie tries to lay any of
No,
it.
If things were not
It
laid
really
out for you
sets
in a
right
worksheet,
down
yeah.
in media res.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Okay,
I
so you
remember
give it a
as
glossary,
I
and you're
remember
probably
sitting
like, hell
down.
yeah.
Yeah.
God, I wish someone would hand me a glossary before Blockbuster right now.
You would think that for me, I would be hell yeah.
Okay.
But I'm one of those, and I remember sitting there as a 13-year-old looking at this thing going, oh no.
I mean, I
No.
understand.
This will never work.
Right. Yes. The general feeling of like if you're handing out glossaries at the multiplex, you've lost your battle. Like,
But I mean,
yeah.
no one had ever seen this. This had never happened before, as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think it's ever happened again.
And I'm like, this kind of speaks to me because I definitely am a reference book nerd, and I love having to read this
Yes,
because
it's
there was.
like, why? Who doesn't want to go to the library while they see a movie?
Yeah, precisely. But there, and I really needed something to look at too because this whole moment was infused with this teenage romantic charge.
Sure.
Because there was a girl who was a little bit older than me sitting next to me with her mom.
Ooh.
And the girl and her mom, and I remember the girl was wearing a Canadian tuxedo, denim jacket, denim, jeans.
Sure. Sort of the still suit of its day.
Exactly so. And she and her mom were talking about the novel Dune. And unlike me, they had both read it.
Wow. Talk about a girl of your dreams.
Yeah.
Serious.
A family you want to marry into.
I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. And she and her mom were talking about it, and they were talking about their favorite characters. And the mom said, I think my favorite character is the sandworms. And I'm like,
Wow.
what? This mom is so cool. This girl's also got to be very cool. And she's like, I agree with you. And then she turns to me, the girl,
Ooh.
and says, are you looking forward to the movie? And it is not an option for me to say any words to a girl.
It was, in fact, not legal at that point.
No. It
Yeah.
was fatal to me. It was
Sure.
my Gom Jabbar. Like, if I accidentally flinched and turned my head and said anything to her,
Yeah.
I would die.
Yeah. Right.
So this glossary gave me something to look at. It's like, yeah, I'm looking forward to
That's
this. Let me get back to what's GD Prime exactly? Where is that in relation? I wish they had a map on here or whatever. And then the movie came on.
Mm-hmm.
The first 40 minutes, of course, are exposition.
Yes,
like
setup.
multiple exposition drops, starting with Virginia Madsen.
Yeah, Virginia Madsen's giant floating head talks for about 4 uninterrupted moments, fades out, and then goes, oh, also, I forgot to mention, comes back, literally comes back and
it's
starts
much
a
mocked.
second.
I
Yes.
kind of love it.
It's wild.
When she said, and I've seen this movie multiple times,
Yeah.
and I always forget that she goes on and on and on about the
Columbus.
world.
One more thing.
Yeah, and then she comes back and said, oh, I forgot to tell you.
Why? Who are you fucking talking to?
Yeah.
Forgot to tell who.
And that's before you even get into a secret report within the guild where
Yes.
they then show you pictures of the planets. They're like doing all this work to get you to understand what's happening, and none of it is working.
That's when I start stroking it. I mean,
Yeah.
just like if there's just like some
Yes.
80s optical effect of
Oh.
like planets where they're like, here are the planets of Dune. I know they do it better than I just did it, obviously. But
No, that was good.
you know,
I like it.
yeah, GD Prime. Can you tell it's the bad one? It's black, you know, like, and I'm just so on board with that nonsense. I know, like you're saying,
You like it or
99%
you
of
don't like it?
audiences are
You said
like,
you
okay.
stroke out when you see
No,
the
I'm
aliens?
stroking it. It was a disgusting
Oh.
thing
He's
to
flaming
say.
ham.
I obviously
I got you.
do not do that in a movie theater. That's
But
not
the comfort
cool.
of
Unless
your
you're
own
at the
home,
Tiki
you have an
Lounge.
Arrow 4K.
Or the Tiki Theater? What's it
Tiki
called?
Theater, yeah.
Tiki Theater.
The first time I tried to watch this on cable was my budding nerd cinephilia that I'm trying to level up.
Yeah.
And I think David probably similar to this. Anytime like a magazine published like any sort of listicle, I was like, well, I got to go through. Here's a watching guide. Here's like 30 things.
Yeah.
Some magazine must have published some like the greatest box office disasters of all time.
It was always on those lists, right? Movies
Some
that
period
got
where I'm
taken
trying
away.
to knock out all the flops,
Right.
the mega flops, and I put on what I think was extended TV cut, and this shit starts, and I'm immediately like, I'm never getting through this.
Right.
I think I did watch it to the end, probably spread out over a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I might have recorded it or saved it to a DVR or whatever the fuck it was.
Sure.
But yes, it's like at this point now I love it.
Sure.
You love it? You love this movie?
I get a tremendous joy from this movie, but I'm saying I love the same thing you love, which is just them being like,
oh, right. Yeah. But when you're 13, you're not you're not really all for that. Right.
I mean, even so, at the end of this screening, this could be me writing memories. You
Sure.
know what I mean? But I feel like my memory was, and Tim, I'm still friends with Tim McGonigal, so we've talked about it.
Congrats.
We both looked at each other and were like, what the hell?
Mhm.
You know, like it did not work.
Yeah.
We were very confused. It ends very abruptly.
Yep.
Quite abruptly, yes.
Yeah. And then you're sent out into the lobby,
Mhm.
and then this girl's probably going to try to talk to you again. So you got to move very quickly and get out
Nightmare.
and try to
Insult
process.
to injury.
Right,
Yeah.
run interference, put on the blinders. Right.
And as you say, it's like it's not very parsable as a film.
Mm-mm.
It's hardly enjoyable. I mean, some of it is freaking repulsive.
It almost feels by design antagonist.
yeah. No, it's. I mean, it's not a fun watch.
No.
No.
And then it's over, and
Yeah.
then you're launched into the planet Earth again.
Yeah.
And yet there are things that I remembering, like, how did this happen?
Yes.
And the thing, like, just starting with the costume design.
Mhm.
Like, I was not a student of film particularly. Like, I couldn't tell you exactly why none of it made sense or worked
Mhm.
together as a film. Like, I've thought a lot about it since then. But simply like, you're gonna have everybody in this sort of like Napoleonic Wars military costumes, very
Yeah.
different from any science fiction film you'd ever seen.
Yes.
The set design obviously is incredible.
It is.
It's obviously building a world that is old-fashioned in a futuristic setting.
Watching this on the 4K,
Lovely Arrow edition.
beautifully restored,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought to myself early on, and I went, let's see if this holds up, if this opinion holds up throughout the entire viewing. I think this film looks as good as any of the original Star Wars films.
Yeah.
I think it is pretty immaculate looking, obviously from a design standpoint. But I also think, save for
I'll
like
make a noise.
2 or 3 shots, I think almost all of the effects hold up.
Oh, no.
Really?
Definitely not. I love how this movie looks, but
Yeah.
at the end when they're riding the worms, and
I think that's the one sequence that doesn't look good to me.
you kind of need that sequence
I
to
agree.
look good. That sequence
Well,
is
I
your
mean, that's-
hammer. Like,
Yeah.
you know
I mean,
how Star Wars ends with the Death Star trench run?
Yeah.
That looks good.
Looks pretty fucking
You
good.
can
Yeah.
and you can go,
Yeah.
watch your DC, like, take all of George Lucas's
Sure.
shit away
Even
from it.
with
Still looks
Matt lines visible.
fucking
Yes.
incredible.
No, I agree with you.
Whereas in the, like, I mean, my Forky was saying, like, I don't really know what's going on. And, like, obviously what's going on is they're riding the worms and blowing everyone up, but you still only kind of just see the worms doing this, not
Yeah.
really doing this. And I feel like I
Well-
needed this.
There,
Everything else looks pretty good.
And for the listener at home, just because what David did was just visual. At first, he was doing this, and then he started doing
kind of
this.
doing this,
Right.
you know.
I would say it was more of a this, but yeah.
You're right. No, that's a good correction.
Yeah.
I think the sets are tremendous.
The sets
I
are
think-
tremendous.
I mean, the sets are better than, say, the first Star Wars, where the Lucas Star Wars looks incredible, but the janky, not janky, that's not the word, but like the kind of the flimsiness
dirty,
of it,
yeah.
dirty, is part of it, and it's covering up for any.
Well, that's part of that world that he's building.
Exactly.
So
Any
it's
beyond this.
shortcomings.
janky.
Yeah.
Right. It's very.
I mean,
I don't want
it's insane
to
to say Star Wars has a shortcoming. It looks great.
A lot of a
Thrifty
word that came
filmmaking.
up a
Right.
lot
Thriftier.
but like
in
smart.
contemporary reviews was rococo.
Sure.
Incredibly elaborate,
Yes.
But
And not
in
only
terms of
that,
like,
lush
like-
and decadent design that spoke to the feudal system that this
Yes.
future universe
That I all
works
love.
on. Yeah.
You think about like Star Wars from 1977,
Yeah.
and part of the great like filmmaking magic of that movie is how strategic they are in reusing certain elements.
the first one especially, right? Though they have the one
They have
hallway,
one hallway
use
that
it
they can
over
keep
and over.
replicating
Right,
or whatever. This film, I'm like, every 40 seconds someone walks into a new room that is an entirely custom built
Right.
set
They
for
have
that.
incredible,
But it's like
halls
they
of
keeps
grandeur.
establishing
yes.
new locations, and you're like, this isn't just they rearranged the furniture in that pre-existing room.
No, I'm calling out more like think about Return of the Jedi. Think
Yes.
about like the
Which
the
David Lynch
speeder scene
was
through the
awful.
forest.
Well, we're
That's
gonna
why
talk
I'm
about
thinking
this a
about
little
it.
bit. Yes.
Sorry.
It's it's something that John that we're going to talk
We
about.
are
I
going
understand.
to talk about it.
I understand. I appreciate
Like,
the tease.
This is not quite that.
No.
It's not. Like forgetting even Return of the Jedi, the space battles, which all look very nice and all that, but just like when I think of the speeder scene through the forest,
Sure. Well,
that's really insane. Like that they pulled that off in 83.
You're right. And the movement stuff is the stuff that he specifically fails on. That is the thing that Lucas was so good at.
Right. Lucas is right at the front of it. It's beyond the fact that anything else. It's like, that's what Lucas is pioneering over and over again, right? Like some new thing in visual effects, which is great for him. Do I prefer this movie to Return of the Jedi?
Oh, wow.
Probably not, I guess. But do I think this movie is more challenging, perhaps, or ambitious than Return of the Jedi? Maybe.
Over the years, as I would revisit it.
I don't know. It's a silly thing to compare, except for their sci-fi films came around at the same time.
I think my fondness grew starting with the set design and the costume design already being very challenging to what my understanding of what a science fiction movie was and sort of changing the game.
Yeah.
And having the courage of that conviction. I had to say that was undeniable even as a young person. And over the years as I would watch it again and again, I would find new things to marvel at. Like, look what, for a guy who's got this mortal wound that he couldn't put what he wanted on screen, look what he got away with. And most notably, I mean, it's the essentially opening, after two different exponential monologues, expositional monologues. The first scene is Jose Ferrer
Oscar
plays
winner.
host to a worm. Or not even that. Not a worm, because there are worms. A third stage guild navigator.
Of course.
Let's call it what it is.
Call
It's
it
a
what
third
it
stage
is.
guild navigator.
Yeah.
And this is the scene that I return to all the time. Not just because it's the first movie. It's an incredible looking scene.
Yeah.
Starting with the whole court, which you barely see.
Right.
Like all of the costumes.
Before they even bring a tank in.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Everything.
then he wheels in a tank that is like 20 feet high, that is full of this phallus with a vagina mouth and T-Rex arms with blue eyes that's spitting out orange drugs. And they have this
unbroken
conversation.
Eye contact. Yeah.
I can't argue with what you're saying.
And surrounding him are a bunch of guys who are going to turn into him if you know deep enough in the Space
If they
Guild
take
lore.
enough spice, yeah.
But you don't know that when you're seeing the movie. You just see a bunch of bald guys smoking vape pipes, wearing black leather suits, which is the look of the movie. If you're not wearing Napoleonic dress uniforms, you're wearing black leather suits, even in the desert, by the way. Great idea. And a couple of them had these like mops and vacuum cleaners to clean up the effluvia that's coming out of this tank.
It looks like they're doing like they're the guys with the brooms at curling.
Yeah, right.
Where they're creating, they're slipping up the space that the tank's gonna roll in and out.
Sorry about the big guy.
You got to smooth down the surface.
Exactly.
And then
they're mobile Zambonis. Yes, what?
Just when you think the story's getting going, then the Emperor and the third stage guild navigator get into a third long conversation, which is all exposition.
Yes.
Ending with the third stage guild navigator saying, this conversation didn't happen. I am not here. And then he disappears. And I'm like, what? That Carlo Rambaldi design is so blatantly grotesque and sexual and unexpected and weird.
Yes.
And I like that to me is I would dare say, no, I'm not going to say linchpin. Sorry.
No, do it.
You can say it.
Do it.
No, I'm not going to. Ben just looked at me. What do you think about that, Ben? Yes or no on linchpin?
Ben's, his thumb is going.
Yeah, it's up.
It's the linchpin moment where the whole thing began to unpack itself to me.
You lean forward a little bit.
And I'm just like, every specific decision in terms of the look and feel of certain sets, certain costumes, certain props, certain moments in the film, they're so weird and so beautifully weird. And he got away with it.
And not
to a
just
degree.
weird for weird's sake, but there is it is an actual effective version of the Lynch magic where you're like, this is tapping into some weird subconscious nightmare thing. There is a potency to this that feels like it is speaking to some unspoken thing in the human condition.
Yeah.
Weirdly, even if the movie narratively isn't always in concert with it, as we've been doing these, and we've recorded some episodes that will come out long after this one, so we've been jumping around in some Lynch stuff. He is really not a plotty guy.
No.
Most of his films, for how sort of like naughty they can be, if you actually break it down, you're like, there are a couple inciting incidents and then weird things happen in between, right? And his two most quote-unquote conventional sort of straightforward narrative films are The Straight Story and Elephant Man, both of which he'll joke are like his two weirdest movies.
Right.
But Elephant Man is just like a man's life.
Yes.
right? It plays out in sort of series of incidents. It does not have a plot that is pushing things forward.
Right.
And straight story is this sort of like picaresque journey where it's just like got to go from point A to point B.
Right.
This is the first and only time in his career that he's just like, this movie is making, I'm signing up to a movie that is going to make promises to the audience that it needs to fulfill.
Right.
Like my clunky metaphor is it's the difference between making a bracelet and making a watch,
Yeah.
where you're like, the only function a bracelet needs to serve is you like the way it looks on your wrist.
Right.
A watch, there's a fucking promise.
Yeah.
That it's going to like fulfill its end of the bargain.
Right.
And this is a bracelet with a watch face
Right.
that is almost mocking you. And there's like, the machinery inside is on fire.
Yeah, it's a melting dial and like a dolly.
It's a dolly. Yes.
Yeah,
I'm not
watch.
going to compare this film to the Denis Villeneuve movie the whole time because I do think at a certain point, what's the point? But I think the opening is pivotal. The Lynch film opens with, yes, Virginia Madsen. Hey, can I tell you some stuff? Which is right from the books, of course. Every chapter, you've got
Princess
Irulan's essentially you're realizing propagandistic diary
Right.
Yeah.
that she's written post facto about the events of Dune.
And it's more than one. Like she's writing, there's a Muad'Dib breeder for children that she
There is.
writes. There's a history of
I
Muad'Dib.
love it.
And you gotta love a beginning is a delicate time.
All great.
That's a terrific
But so
line that
starts
is
with
announcing we're going to have some problems with this film.
And then
we
as
don't
you
know where
say-
to start.
And then, as you say, there is informing you of the planets. Here they are, And then there is a scene which is not in the book. It is essentially making subtext text because in the book we know this happened, but it's never shown.
Right.
That the Emperor meets with the Spacing Guild, and the Spacing Guild is like, "Do this."
Right.
But put, you don't like the Atreides? Fine, we agree. Put them on the Spice Planet. Let's have the Harkonnens do our dirty work for us, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They're all talking about this. An audience, even with a glossary, is like, who are you talking about?
Yes.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
Villeneuve starts with the Atreides family. Okay, he actually starts with like, which rocks. Just so you know you're in for like weird times, but then it's like, here is the father, here is his son.
Yeah.
Here is where they live.
Yeah.
Here's the mom. She's teaching her son to be weird like her.
Yeah, the weirding way.
They live on a nice wet planet. They have to go to a dry planet. Like we're entering with people.
We got to move this bullhead. Like we know that we're moving because we're
big.
crating up the bullhead.
Right? And like, and now meet Duncan, and now meet, Thurfear and all this stuff. And then, yes, we're going to eventually lay out some wider context for you through dialogue, through some little film books that he reads. That's fine.
Well,
but
right.
slowly. So you actually know who this is happening
Well,
to.
you're showing, not telling. I mean,
Yes.
that's a writing term that I just invented. But I mean, I think even
Good.
as a 13-year-old, I understood that this glossary announced we have no faith that we can convey the information.
Correct.
Right.
And
As does, I think, having people just be like, so this is what's going to happen in the movie, like, to kick it off.
Absolutely. And information becomes the enemy, right? Because
Absolutely.
the more, I mean, you would think like, oh, let's show you the 4 major planets.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, I got 4 names in my head.
You got
DD
4 names in your
Prime,
plan, it's also like-
Caladan, Arrakis, also known as Dune.
True.
Now, here's the thing. Like, one of the great wounds of this film for David Lynch was that he didn't have final cut.
Sure.
And in the midst of the production, he started to have to cut a whole bunch of stuff because they were running out of money.
Yeah.
And, one of the things you read about is that where he left his imprint isn't on the whole movie, but it's in moments. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like
the
and
things
there's-
that he fought for.
yeah, that he
right,
had to
yes.
he had to sneak
That
a
mattered
David
to
Lynch
him.
movie into a David Lynch movie.
Right.
That having been said, the movie opens and immediately you're like, he got them to let him do the fucking industrial ambient droning noise throughout the entire. How did he win that argument?
Yeah,
This
right.
is cool.
No, I agree.
Rocks! Yeah,
but you're
sure.
like, it's so odd the things that they let him get away with
Right.
versus what he says
I think-
he feels like he
But
failed on.
what I would say is that David Lynch, for all the studio interference, one thing that if I were the executive,
Yeah.
or if an
Okay,
executive
so
had
you're a
said
large
this-
Italian man smoking a cigar.
Right. Well, if I'm Dino De Laurentiis or De Laurentiis, whatever, but it's like,
Yeah.
if I were one of these guys at Universal, I'm like, can we just call them Planet Dune?
Yeah, do
Like,
we need
right.
to say Arrakis?
Arrakis, and that's from the book, obviously. They're
Yes.
constantly saying Arrakis, Dune, Desert Planet. It's like there's
Yeah.
3 words for the same, 3 things for one thing. And the whole movie is indulgent and opulent in that way. It makes for wonderful world building in a book, but in a movie, it's like, I can't just give it one name. Call it Arrakis or Dune.
Look,
And the terminology, it says Arrakis is the desert planet known as Dune.
Ben
Yes,
found the
I'm sure.
glossary.
I know that's in the glossary,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which they also directly say again in the
and
film.
they're saying it all the time. And
Yeah.
their idea is if we say this enough,
Yeah.
and also if we do enough internal monologue voiceover,
Mhm.
then people will get it. When in fact, all that information just makes me turn off.
There's
Like-
an awful lot of like something is happening and Paul then thinks like, it would be bad if I did that. I'm going to have to do that. Where you're just like, anyway.
This is the
I'm
thing
gonna
that's so wild
open the
about this
dossier.
movie. And I now have gotten to a place where I love it as an object,
Sure.
as its
Absolutely.
own weird thing and experience.
Yeah.
Me too.
and-
It's a
part of
very
what's-
beautiful and weird
Absolutely.
and in a very David Lynchian way, a deformed object.
It has perhaps the greatest percentage of dialogue that is expositional of anything I have ever seen.
Right.
Which is especially crazy in a Lynch movie,
Right.
obviously.
It is like
Right.
90% exposition. There's almost nothing that happens that is said between two characters that has anything to do with them relating to each other as emotional creatures.
Again,
Right.
right. This is obviously what another film hit on, is there needs to be a lot of emotion built into this.
Right. And things like focusing on the Lady Jessica Paul relationship, the Paul Chani relationship,
Yeah.
which
right.
like the whole second movie is built around Chani. And in this film, once Paul and Chani actually meet, they have less time together on screen than in the first movie, where the whole point is she's kind of just a cameo
Right.
at the end.
Now, to
Right.
be fair, the book treats Chani as an object to, like she's not a particularly important character in the book either.
but that's
Right.
smart Villeneuve strategy
it
shit.
is. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yes.
But let's talk about Dune. I'm opening the dossier.
I just wanted to add the one
He
thing
wants
to
add.
this.
Yes.
It is so wild when you're like starting with the multiple like prologue table setting things.
Yeah.
Then every character speaks exclusively in exposition. And then like 12 minutes in, they introduce. Also, we hear characters' internal monologues.
Yes.
And their internal monologues
Sometimes.
are additional exposition.
It's just too much to take
Right.
in.
And you're like,
and
the
as you point
whole-
out, they double the internal monologues usually double the information that the characters are
Correct.
giving using their not only their voices, the voice.
And the Lynch dream state thing is what's potent about this movie, what makes
Yes.
him a good fit for Dune in theory, but you feel something in the inexperience of, and this leads directly into the dossier, it being insane that this is his third movie, that the arc is weirdo midnight movie he basically self-produces over 5 years with film school friends,
Yes.
to surprising jump to prestige, critically beloved, but
Right.
fairly arty, sober, highly emotional drama
Right.
and like arch period piece, right? To then Hollywood being like, well, obviously he needs to make a big sci-fi blockbuster next.
Right.
That it's not just that he makes Dune, but that he makes Dune after being like, Dune is the right choice for me over Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that you feel him going like, I don't know how to quite do this. I don't trust myself to figure out other ways to convey this information.
To me, trust is exactly what's lacking in this movie
Yeah.
overall. Like the studio didn't trust Lynch. He got entrusted initially by the De
Well,
Laurentiis.
let me open the dossier.
David,
Creek.
use the voice.
Okay, I
Yeah.
really should use the voice.
Use the
'cause-
voice.
Okay.
Be quiet and let me talk now.
David Lynch made The Elephant Man.
Mm-hmm.
It was a hit. It was nominated for Best Picture. So obviously now it becomes a director that studios wish to hire.
Yes.
He wishes to make a film called Ronnie Rocket. We've already talked about it.
Every time
About a boy who is electricity.
he wants to make Ronnie Rocket.
He actually comes close now because he has real clout. Zoetrope, Francis Ford Coppola's, House of Madness.
I was going to say, great at actually getting movies made, especially in the 1980s. Incredible at having an idea that seems crazy and executing it in a way that is normal.
hit
Yes.
after hit.
It's definitely people go to see all of them.
Like basically, it's
So-
one of the only studio slates
Yeah.
that you're like, I'll just see whatever they release because it's going to be a hit.
Absolutely. It was a guarantee.
You're going to go check out that new American Zoetrope joint?
It's the
Absolutely.
MCU of its day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's then offered Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
His agent tells him, you get this job, you're going to get $3 million. And that's in 1980, whatever.
1983 money,
2,
82,
yeah,
81.
and
right.
like,
And what's a big part of the promise of getting a job like Return of the Jedi? It's a double-edged sword. One is they're not totally going to let you sink or drown in this thing
sure,
because Lucas has some
there will be
quality
a lot
control.
of guardrails around you. Sure.
Right. But the flip side of that
It's
is
not your
it's
product.
not ever going to totally be your thing.
100%. So Lynch recalls basically, he goes to San Francisco. He goes to a place called Egg Company, which is near the Warner Brothers lot, and is handed an envelope with a credit card, a key, and an airline ticket. And then I'm sorry,
I
no,
didn't
he
know
did that
this
in Los
story.
Angeles.
Okay.
The airline takes him, of course, to San Francisco, and he's brought to George Lucas.
Marin County. Sure.
And he says he was very flattered,
Mhm.
But I don't know why I went. Star Wars is not my cup of tea.
I have to say, I was very flattered to meet George Lucas. Unfortunately, Star Wars wasn't my cup of tea.
He wore a nice flannel shirt tucked into blue dungaree jeans.
This is the line I remember. I've seen him say it, I think.
His neck was so fat.
It wasn't that fat back then, okay? Give him a break, okay? It wasn't 90s Lucas. We're talking 80s Lucas. It's probably middle.
He wasn't full bullfrogging it.
Wasn't full bullfrog.
Uh-huh.
But he's buttoning that top button. You
yeah.
can't stop him.
No,
Doesn't matter
absolutely.
how big the neck is. He started talking to me, and I started getting a headache that got steadily worse.
George, can I give Jabba the Hutt a vagina mouth?
I feel like he always talks about the moment where George started explaining the Ewoks being the
talked
moment that
about that.
broke him. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, fundamentally, he says, I did feel pressure to say yes because I did respect him.
Mhm.
And this obviously was a big gig.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to do it. He says to his agent, I can't do it. I feel all this pressure, but I can't do it. And he says, you don't have to do it.
Sure.
Calls George, says no, thank you. George is like, 100%, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Lucas, in retrospect, is like, I might have gone a bridge too far then. Like, that might have been crazy as much. I have deep respect for the guy, but it is so hard
Lucas
to
is saying maybe I dodged a
look, when you look at Richard
bullet full of weird there.
Marquand and
Yeah.
Return of the Jedi,
Right.
and everything you hear about that movie, Lucas is very, very hands-on the
Much
entire
more
time.
than Empire.
I cannot imagine how that would have worked with David Lynch. They
No,
would have
yeah,
either
and I think
fought
probably
or-
Lynch
whatever.
sensed
Yeah.
that he was going to get a very, very strong and empowered creative collaborator, which is not what he was looking for.
Here's the other part of it. I think about him doing that movie in particular, right? A film I have great
the
love for.
third Star Wars movie,
But
not
is-
the second.
Right.
Yeah.
A film that in my adult years, I have now come to recognize some of the failings,
Sure.
right? The creakiness that does not exist in the first two films.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
It's still a good movie, though.
I agree. It's got some shit in it that's like my favorite shit in
Of
all of
course.
Star Wars, if not some of my
Yeah.
favorite shit in all of movies.
Yeah.
That stuff is the stuff that I could see Lynch totally nailing. But
Like
to
what?
be fair,
Give me
Like
a-
Jabba's Palace,
The whole
sure.
Jabba
the
stuff.
whole first 30 minutes, you're like, Lynch would go fucking hog wild on that.
Yeah.
I actually think he would probably do a good job with the final chunk with Luke and the Emperor and Vader.
Right.
I think he could kind of handle the sort of like monstrous sort of broken man inside of Vader and all of that sort of reveal stuff.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Like
yeah.
there's stuff in it I think he would do an incredible job with. But that is the stuff the movie already does excellently.
Sure.
And everything that I think is a failing in that movie, I think Lynch would have been completely confounded by. I don't think he would know how to handle anything in Endor.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have known how to solve like Han Solo having nothing to do in that movie.
Right.
I wouldn't like to see an Ewok designed by David Lynch. I think
No.
that would scare me.
No, and if it was Lynch having to direct an Ewok designed by Lucas's team,
Right.
you could see the movie having a feeling of disinterest whenever it was on screen.
So in
Right.
the dossier, David,
Yes.
when he turns from ROTJ to DUNE,
He does not yet. I will say
Okay.
he was offered a couple other projects that are interesting.
Okay.
Richard Roth approached him to direct Red Dragon,
Oh.
which of course eventually Michael Mann makes as Manhunter.
Would have been interesting.
That is when he pitches Roth on Blue Velvet. We talk more about that on our Blue Velvet episode, but that's sort of the germ of Blue Velvet, where
Mhm.
basically Lynch is like, keep thinking about like hiding in a closet to spy on a woman.
Yeah.
And Roth's like, okay, tell
Got
me
any
more.
movies to pitch? Yeah.
right.
That's all I got.
He's also offered Tender Mercies, the Robert
Oh.
Duvall movie, which is
Interesting.
a lovely,
Yeah.
quiet, drama that is, again, a little hard to see Lynch doing, but something
But
like
also
The Straight Story
is
speaks
very
to it.
similar. He
Yeah, I
obviously
was
gets
gonna
that much
say,
later,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's very much a match sensibility.
Lynch
Yeah.
thinks, not right for me, turned
Sure.
out to be a great movie in his
Yeah.
opinion. He was also approached by Cameron Crowe to direct Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Wow.
I have no idea
No.
what that meeting was really like or what that movie would be.
Why is this happening?
I don't know. It's so weird to think of this guy making.
Crow says very, very sweet about it, slightly perplexed that we thought of him,
Yeah.
got into a white VW
'cause
bug and drove away.
David
basically.
Lynch wasn't a brand at that
I was
point.
going to say, like, here's this guy who has established himself very quickly,
Right.
and yet it feels like Hollywood doesn't have a handle on who he is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what had come out was Eraserhead and Elephant Man.
Yeah.
And Eraserhead is a weird student film. Doesn't count for a lot of people. I'm just saying, and then the normies look at the Elephant Man, and it's like, weird makeup and everything else, but it is kind of a by the numbers.
In a way, but also he's made two movies about sensitive weirdos and the pain of existing in society,
right? That
are shot in very arch black and white.
You're talking about Jeff Spicoli,
yes, of course, with top to bottom clanging.
Yeah.
Right. It's those two movies are very similar in a lot of ways.
Well, then you see Elephant Man as student
Judy
film
Garland.
Mark II.
Sure.
And it's well, now what if we give this guy a real thing to make?
Yeah, it's just funny to think well, clearly this guy's a chameleon and could make any type of movie.
I think that it was just he was the guy everyone was talking about, so he's going to get all these conversations, right?
Yeah.
Just be funny to bring in Judy Garland to a Lynch movie. She could sing "Clang, Clang, Clang" goes the troll.
Hold.
Raffaella de Laurentiis meets with Dune in about 1981 or 2, saying, "My daddy Dino has acquired Dune. I think you can handle it." They met, and she loved him right away. Dino loved him too. My father loved directors, and he thought David was as good as Fellini. She says, "Okay, he might be." They're kind of in similar worlds.
Yeah.
Dino does, according to the dossier, love him so much, except he didn't like Eraserhead. He liked the Elephant Man.
Okay, that's 50-50.
I would say, right. But he's sort of saying, I want the Elephant Man Lynch, not Eraserhead Lynch. And I would say, if you're saying that, you may have already misunderstood what you're getting with this guy.
I would agree.
Because I don't really know how you're distinguishing it, except that, yes, one is a more abstract plot, one is not. But those movies have tons in common. It's just that one is a, more straightforwardly sad story about a terrible, situation that a person was in. And the other one is Eraserhead, which is also, honestly, that as well. Lynch says, Dino calls him and says, "I want you to read this book, June." And Lynch is like, "June?" And he's like, "No, June." And I don't know, he goes on like this. And Lynch had never read the book, reads the book, and this is the part that I don't understand, but I guess loved the book. If I'm David Lynch reading Dune, I would kind of be like, this is too much to handle.
People all over the world love this book.
It was a huge book. To be clear, I love the book.
I know.
But if I'm just kind of tossed Dune, right? Hey, why don't you check this out?
First of all, you better duck, because if it catches you in the head, you're going to get hurt.
But, and you crack it open, I'm not going to be like, this would be easy. You know what I mean? I'd be like, Jesus, how the hell do you do this movie?
Yeah, but don't you think that that's what animates David Lynch to a certain degree? That and the fact that instead of working with a control freak like George Lucas in San Francisco, he's working with two Italian, a father-daughter producing
who are a little bit
outside
of the system and might
a little more maverick.
What are the De Laurentiis? What's the book on the De Laurentiis family at this point?
That's a really good question.
Oh God, it's so much to talk about. I mean, what's the book on Dino De Laurentiis? Griffin.
I just don't remember.
He starts making movies in the 40s.
But what was he known for?
Well, the first Conan had happened at this point. Barbarella, right. First Conan has happened at this point, right?
Yes, it has. Yeah. 82. I think Conan the Destroyer is 84.
Yeah.
So
King Kong, the
that's a big one,
right?
He does these big genre films,
yes,
but with have an arty twist to them sometimes.
Yeah, but with a pulpy Italian arty, but kind of shabby element to them.
But he starts out in Italian films. He does a lot of genre stuff. He does Fellini stuff. He's one of these guys who's just a fucking mogul.
And he does
70s and 80s. He's trying to do big epics.
I do feel like he loves the movies,
absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And not in a negative way, really, but he's a big bossy guy.
No, but if I'm David Lynch and I see these two charismatic Italian people, one of whom is, made Barbarella, I would be much more inclined to be like, I can probably work my way into this world better than I can work my way into George Lucas's world.
Absolutely,
is
but
my
also,
guess.
Just he did Serpico, he did fucking. Barbarella, we said, John Huston's The Bible in the beginning, just a very weird swath of movies. Here's the thing I want to bring up as a conversational topic. Hollywood loves when anything is a success, trying to figure out how to copy it, right?
Sure.
Run it into the fucking ground.
Yeah.
Dune was positioned so much as, here is the next Star Wars.
Sure.
It is coming out a year after Return of the Jedi.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Star Wars has been a thing at this point for over 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
No one else really tries to do Star Wars.
Well,
like
Star Trek, I would say. That's the other
You know what? You're
Yeah.
right, but that it's such a weird example because it's like reviving another thing.
It is,
Yeah,
but Star Trek the Motion Picture happens
Of
because
course. You're right.
they're like, fuck, like Star
Yeah.
Wars scooped our ass.
But here's my point, I guess, right?
like a big space opera. I think there had been the Flash Gordon movie.
well, let me pin this, okay? Because it's like certainly Star Wars legitimizes sci-fi, which had, its sort of post-2001 run, I would say.
This is presuming you accept Star Wars as a science fiction
Well,
film.
I'm going to pin that as well.
All right.
2001 leads to a spat of things like Silent Running,
Sure.
these movies that are like very heady
Heady.
and are serious and grown up
Mm-hmm.
and sort of more
clean,
hard
and
sci-fi.
clean and streamlined in their design.
Totally.
A very, very specific
Yes.
Tomorrowland look to them.
Right. Then
Yeah.
Star Wars becomes an industry in and of itself,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
popularizes this sort of space opera,
Right.
sci-fi fantasy as an A picture, a legitimate A picture that's making so much money and is like, we built a world here. This is expansive. This can run forever.
Mm.
And then the immediate things you get in the wake of Star Wars, I would say the Star Wars halo effect, are like Alien, perhaps being a pitch that is more warmly received because it's like, well, audiences like sci-fi. But this is
Right.
an R-rated slasher film.
Right.
Blade Runner, we got one of the stars of Star Wars, but it's doing a weird sci-fi noir. No one's trying to do the big, like, two-fisted, four-color sort of sci-fi fantasy epic thing.
Right.
Build a world. I would argue Krull is
I
one of
was
the
about to
only
say,
ones.
there's some. Okay, there's Krull.
Yeah.
There is Flash Gordon. That
Now,
was a big movie.
Flash Gordon, I want to put as this category of things like Last Starfighter, like the
I was
Masters
going to
of the
say
Universe
Last
movie,
Starfighter.
Right.
Right.
where
yeah.
it's like 1 foot firmly in our reality, right? Those
Mhm.
movies all have the like, here's a normal
Here's a
guy,
guy from
who
Earth.
ends up in space.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
sure,
here's
sure,
space
sure.
people who end up in Earth.
Right.
This sort of Star Wars Dune Krull
And
thing
of course,
like,
on television, you had Battlestar Galactica
Yeah.
and Buck Rogers.
Which is a
right, there's
full
almost
ripoff.
more of a direct influence on television
Yeah.
than people taking the big bet of like, we have to invest in building a whole world and the movie starts and Virginia Madsen's face has to explain everything to you.
Right.
Still feels like a thing they find daunting.
It is daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's obviously a major ask of people. Krull is a funny one, but Krull has fantasy, like a lot
Yeah.
of to sort of keep it grounded a little bit.
And I would say that, you mentioned that Star Wars
I'm looking at a sort of sci-fi list, right?
as,
I'm looking as
Tron,
well.
as an A movie, and it was
Yeah.
obviously a very successful movie.
Uh-huh.
But I think that at the time, like 2001 was an A movie made by a serious director.
Yes.
Yeah,
Do you know what
Alien
I
is
mean?
so indebted to 2001,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say, right? More. But
But Star
Tron,
Wars
1 foot in
and
reality.
Star Wars and Jaws in 75 and 77 legitimized the B movie.
like obviously,
So what they became was high quality B movies that a
Yes.
lot of people in culture still turn their nose up at.
Absolutely. And we're like,
still
this is
parodied,
degrading the
and
art.
it was not cool.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
obviously George Lucas, I think, would basically admit that he was heavily inspired by Dune. There's no question.
Yeah.
And obviously Dune, when the more you learn about it, the more you read the sequels, especially, and just Herbert in general, like you're getting one man's very particular historical and political thoughts and interests
Mhm.
crammed into this crazy sci-fi narrative, right? And beyond that, things like the Bene Gesserit, where Frank Herbert is basically like, what's up with nuns? Like, I went to Catholic school. Those
Yeah.
people are crazy.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
things like that.
yeah.
That are, and then Lucas is kind of like, right, the Fremen
The
make
gum,
so
I
much.
never thought of the gum jabbar as being a ruler that a nun would hit you with.
Literally,
That's obviously what it is.
what it's so deeply rooted in him being scared of nuns,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
nuns seem scary.
Yeah. You ever see that nun? The nun?
Well, she's no good.
She's not a good,
And she's actually in Mulholland Drive, right?
Oh, the actress.
She's the
Yeah.
lady behind the dumpster.
Yeah,
the
you're
man,
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Gotta watch out for the nuns.
And the nun, too.
And
right.
not
and
just the nun, also the nun.
Also
and
the
then
nun.
Lucas stretches.
Lucas nunning now.
Okay.
Nun 2, hyper nun.
Sorry.
Lucas,
Do the voice. If you want us to stop doing bits, you got to do the voice,
Yeah.
David.
Lucas stretches, I think, the guerrilla stuff, the Fremen, right, like into this more broad narrative. Like Lucas is obviously like, this is like, the Viet Cong, right? Like, and like revolutions throughout history. I'll make it like a little vaguer.
And the Force wouldn't exist without
so
Paul's inner journey.
All of
and the Force is just like Dune. Like the Force in Star Wars is like Dune without the drugs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I would have loved to have seen the trench run and
with
the
them
Death
like
Star.
huffing spice.
Yeah,
right?
like Luke is like, I can't read my targeting computer. I just threw up all over.
They all
Straight
have a
edge Dune.
spice orgy before they get.
Yeah.
It is a little bit. And the Force is just like further abstraction, right? Like in Dune, it's kind of like you can connect to everyone in your bloodline all the way back. And the Force is kind of like, the Force is just everyone's energy kind of connected, all of life.
But also
Like,
it's a blood disease, as we've
it's a blood disease, and it means that you can like pull something that's like, you ever wanted a cereal bowl that's like kind of far away? That's what the Force is for.
Star Wars is so wonderful and accessible, right? Because it's like, here's a big metaphysical concept. What is the Force? The Force is what connects and binds the universe. That's all you need to know.
Right. And that's why it's so funny that when someone is like, and that means you can do this, fans are like, no, the Force, you could do this in the Force and not this in the Force. And you have to go to school before you do anything in the Force. And they're normal about it always.
Always normal.
Hodgman, do you feel comfortable sharing the anecdote you have told me in the past about Peter Berg?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's book 2 of the Dune Chronicles
here we
of
go.
John
Peter
Hodgman.
Berg, director Peter Berg.
I think we can start interweaving these narrative threads between the dossier and the books of Hodgman.
So after I watched the Dune in 1984, time marches on. Fast forward, Chapter House Dune style, 3,000 years or whatever.
Did you turn into a worm?
I read the book.
John Hodgman and his wife fall deeply in love. His children grow.
And another thing.
Yeah, I did not become a half human, half sandworm hybrid. Spoiler. I watched the sci-fi miniseries, which came out in 2000,
which I love.
Is fine.
Yeah. But that thing is basically just someone being like, what if I just wrote down Dune as a screenplay?
Right.
Like, most faithful adaptation possible, whatever sci-fi can afford. It has like,
and we'll film it in this high
good,
school auditorium.
Right. It has like pretty good production value for a sci-fi miniseries of the time.
Wildly expensive at the time at a scale that now is microscopic.
But it really is. And they do Children of Dune as well, where they're just like, let's just fucking write it down, man.
And I watched a little bit of it again because I just wanted to see some scenes. And I was like, who's that guy playing Fade Routha? He's
Matt Kieslar.
Yeah.
The great Matt Kieslar.
Yeah.
The Last Days of Disco. The Middleman.
And also he was
fucker.
Johnny in Waiting for Guffman.
That's another one.
He's so
handsome.
Handsome.
What was the thing I saw him in recently? You realize, like,
he
15 years ago, he's became
like a professor or something?
Let me get this right. I want to say...
I love Matt Kieslar. And I'm not even sure if I'm saying his name right, but I'm pretty sure it's Kieslar.
I'm sure he's happy no matter how
he became a physician's assistant. He's an instructor of urology at the Oregon School of Medicine.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
You can read a paper he wrote at Portland Community College, or I'm sorry, from Reed explaining his shift.
I think he's
when
great.
His career had slowed down.
I think he's really great in Scream 3.
What was that? I saw him in something fucking...
I mean, he wasn't in anything recently, so he must have seen an older thing.
Oh, you know what it is?
What?
I, for the first time ever, watched Larry David's Sour Grapes.
You sure did. I saw that you watched Clear History as well. You're really...
I had a very bad case of bronchitis.
Yeah, you were
and in my
laid
madness, I was like, let me watch both Larry David movies
And how
that no
are
one
they?
ever talks about. Neither one is good. Matt Kieslar plays Matt LeBlanc in Sour Grapes. There's this whole weird running thread in Sour Grapes of how much Larry David clearly hates Friends.
Right. Because it was made right after he left Seinfeld.
Yes.
Got it.
And Kieslar's clearly playing LeBlanc.
Yeah.
And to spoil Sour Grapes, a movie that no one likes that's almost impossible to watch now.
I promise you I will never see it.
Yeah. Steven Weber's character is encouraged to perform surgery on him, even though it's not his specialty. He has testicular cancer, and I think Steven Weber's usually a heart guy. And he's going through all the stress of the Larry David-style hijinks. And in his stress and distraction, he puts the transparency backwards. He removes the wrong ball and then has to remove the second ball.
Funny.
And then you see him waking up and Steven Weber telling him the news. And then the next time you see the character, it's through characters watching this Friends parody. I think it's called Pals or something on TV. And Matt Kieslar now sounds like Mickey Mouse. And he does the whole second half of the movie doing an incredible Mickey Mouse voice.
Oh, wow. Well, Kieslar did a great job.
Yeah. Anyway,
Love
he
Keyslayer.
played Fenrir Alpha.
Wait,
So
okay.
by
So you
that time,
watched the
I've seen the miniseries.
Wow, what a tangent.
incredible tangent,
Sleeper must
really
awaken.
worthwhile.
And I just wanted to respect that actor. I liked him as Fade Routher in that
Put
thing.
a
I liked him as
tremendous amount
Johnny
of respect on him.
and
Yeah.
Guffman. I didn't see whatever movie you were talking about, The Wrong Ball or whatever it was called.
Gets the wrong ball.
And then I go through my own life journey where I accidentally get kidnapped by television. I go on The Daily Show.
Sure.
By accident promoting a book, The Areas of My Expertise, available probably somewhere. And then I get hired to do these ads for Apple Computer, and I get flown a couple of times to the coast
Sure.
in first class.
Hey.
Cool.
And on maybe my second or third trip, had to have actually been by 2007 because I'd moved to Brooklyn. Maybe on a second or third trip, I find myself in first class sitting next to Peter Berg. Now, Peter Berg at this time, I know as an actor more than as a director, even though he had directed Friday Night Lights at that point.
Yeah, had only done Very Bad Things, Friday Night Lights, and The Rundown, possibly.
But he was obviously
he was
an
in the
actor.
midst-
He was the guy from Chicago.
Yeah,
Hope.
I'm saying, but
Yeah.
as a director, those were
I
the
knew him
three.
as Chicago Hope's Billy
Yeah.
Cronk, and I
Right.
knew him from a weird indie movie called While You Were Sleeping, where he's a World War II guy who gets frozen, woken up in the 1990s.
It's probably not called that because that's a famous romantic comedy.
Right. So, anyway, it was called something else.
Sure.
Well, not While You Were Sleeping, but anyway.
But I feel like particularly after Friday Night Lights, he was positioned as like, this guy might be a serious director in the making.
Right. And I
Yeah.
believe in the context of our conversation, he was probably working on Hancock at that time.
Makes sense? Which was obviously a huge step up in budget and working with hottest talent in Hollywood, what have you.
Right. So, I'm still confused as to why I am sitting in first class in anything.
Well, I can explain to you. You were a PC.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's
But
called Late for Dinner.
Late for Dinner. Thank you very
Wild.
much. Yeah,
That is
Late
a
for Dinner.
wild thing for that movie to be called.
Pretty good title.
Yeah.
Peter Berg.
Peter Berg.
Yes.
So I recognize this guy because I used to work in a movie store, and I saw a lot
Yeah,
of
you
things
know.
that he was
Okay,
in. I
all
know
right,
who he
all
is.
right. Move it along.
I
Dune.
can't believe
That's a
that
good
he's
story,
here.
David. Let him
We get
spin his
stuck
yarn.
on the. I'll try to keep it.
Yes.
Thank you.
I stretch it out.
We got stuck. Okay. So let me see if I can remember the type of aircraft we
If
were
you don't
in.
Aisle
hurry this
or
up, I'm
window?
going to cut it off. I will use the voice.
Okay. So sitting next to Peter Berg, I'm like, wow, Peter Berg is here, and already my life is pretty surreal.
Mhm.
There's a delay, and we're stuck on the tarmac for a long time, and it's really, really annoying. Like we're there for an hour, and everyone's kind of huffing and puffing, and then Peter Berg reaches into his leather suitcase or satchel that he's got at his feet, and he pulls out a copy of Dune.
Mhm.
And I can't help myself at this point. I was like, wow. And I say this out loud. I wish I had a copy of Dune to read. And he goes, do you want one? I've got 2 copies. And I'm like,
Why do you have 2 copies?
why do you have 2 copies of Dune? And his answer, which does not answer the question ever, the question is never answered. He says, because I'm thinking about turning it into a movie.
Gotta have 2.
You gotta have 2 copies, I guess.
Gotta have 2. Just do it like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he starts talking
Put
about
both
this.
hands to work.
Yeah.
He starts talking about the movie Dune that he's going to make, and he's like, "This is a very famous science fiction novel." I'm like, "Peter Berg, it's me. I know. I'm a
what
PC.
Dune
I got
is,
it."
Right. Yeah.
And
Right.
he's like, no one's ever really been able to crack it. And I'm thinking to myself at this point, am I going to be the one who has to break it to Peter Berg?
Does he not know that
That-
this is impossible?
Well, not only
No,
that it's
that there
impossible,
is a Dune movie.
but there was one
Oh,
made.
sure.
Not only one, but 2 at this point. There
Yes.
was Dune, and then the Frank Herbert's Dune on sci-fi. Like,
Yeah.
does he not know this? Do I have to tell Peter Berg? Is this my job?
Yeah.
And
And as David was saying, the sci-fi miniseries received well, but kind of interpreted as, well, that's the only way you could do it, which is just literally spell it out.
Right. And even then, I'm not sure anyone, I mean, David, you liked it, but I don't think that anyone who loved Dune or David Lynch's Dune or anyone thought that they had cracked the code.
No, not making something worthy of.
And Peter
right.
Berg felt that he was going to crack the code because he showed me some spreadsheets of the most popular movies of all time.
He had come up with the algorithm.
Yeah. And he was
Yeah.
like, Star Wars, Harry Potter, such and such. What do these all have in common? Young men coming of age stories.
Sure.
I'm like, it's pretty universal.
Right. Right.
Absolutely, as part of the Dune DNA is the boy's adventure element. And he's like, and then he revealed that he did know that David Lynch had made a version of Dune. And he's like, I want to make Dune, but I know that David Lynch had his own take on it,
Mhm.
but I want to really emphasize the less weird stuff. I want it to be
yeah.
I want
really
it to be boys'
de-emphasize.
adventure,
Right.
military science fiction.
Yeah.
And it's going to make all the money in the world. And basically, he was going to make Dune for normies.
Yeah.
Was his idea.
Yeah, he was on that for a couple years and then dropped out saying it wasn't the right thing for him. And the script was taken to Pierre Morel, who is the guy who made Taken.
Jeez.
Now,
and was in his hands for a minute before Paramount dropped the rights. This was Paramount.
at one point, after I talked to Peter Berg, and I do not know how this happened, Peter Berg and I had a long-ranging conversation about Dune, life, and everything.
That's great.
You know, at one point he asked me what it was like to live in Brooklyn. I said, it's great. He's like, well, I have kids, but I'm divorced and I want to have a place that's good for kids. And I'm like, well, Park Slope is terrific.
Sure, get yourself a brownstone, Peter.
And then Peter Berg, and listen, Peter Berg, if you're listening to this is what I remember. Peter Berg goes, right. But if you want to fuck a woman at 2 a.m., what do you do? And I'm like, okay, now you're talking to the wrong person.
I would say
For the Dune conversation,
Park Slope,
I
not
was
great
here.
for that.
Not
Right.
great
You're
for
not.
that.
You can't just like hit the bars in Park Slope at 2 a.m.
There may be an answer, but John Hodgman is not going to. I'm a PC. I'm
You're
not
really-
PC.
There's like one
I'm not gonna
Irish
be able to
bar
help you
where
there.
like cops will yell at
Yeah.
me. Maybe I don't know if any ladies are gonna want to fuck
The
me.
Mac would maybe know. Not to stereotype, but the Mac would
Justin
maybe
might know. Justin might know.
Well,
but-
I'm not going to say anything about Justin Long, but the Mac.
Oh, the Mac.
As an
character-
idea.
That character.
As
yeah.
a dramatic construct.
And sometime after that, I got a call saying, Peter Berg's working on Dune. Would you want to take a swing at the script? And I was like, this is not ever going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Sure.
So I have to pass it up, which was a
fool's
mistake.
errand.
I felt
Yeah.
like.
You could
Well, yeah.
I could
I
have
mean,
made
why
a little
shouldn't
cheap money on a movie that was indeed probably
I would
never
have
gonna
gotten to
happen.
hang out with my best friend Peter Berg some
Yeah,
more.
well,
probably.
just don't be around him at 2 a.m. Peter.
Now, I love Kyle MacLachlan. This
Okay.
movie gives David Lynch the gift of Kyle MacLachlan meeting this guy who's going to be such an incredible figure in his language as a filmmaker, being able to use this guy as sort of an analog for himself. It is so bizarre to me that he got this part without having a pre-existing relationship with Lynch, and that he is kind of a weird fit for it, in that for how young he actually was when they made this movie, no one has ever perpetually looked like a grown-ass man more than Kyle
Yeah.
MacLachlan.
He doesn't have a grown-up fit.
He just has such an adult jaw.
I think he's good in this.
I don't
like
think
Kyle
he's bad
this.
in it.
Yeah.
But I also think you don't watch this and go, oh my God, the shit Lynch is going to do with him. This is his guy.
Right.
It doesn't feel like this amazing discovery partnership has been formed.
Well, I mean, the thing is, and I realized this, and I was reading this when I was 13 years old when I was trying to read Dune. It's like the thing that I could connect with was Paul is 15.
Sure.
I'm
Like-
going back to the dossier.
Okay.
You guys, we've jumped all over. But
I just
need
want to say
tell-
one quick thing, which is Late for Dinner. The film you referenced was, in fact, directed by W.D. Richter, the only other film directed by the man who did Buckaroo Banzai.
The only other, right.
The
that must have
other
been why I
movie
watched it. I didn't
we
even
always
remember
talk
that.
about.
Yeah.
Great movie. Dune.
We'll talk about that later.
talk
Arthur
about that
P.
later.
Jacobs at one point wanted David Lean to make Dune.
Sure.
That makes sense.
David Lean said, and I quote, no. I don't know if he actually said no, but he passed. At one point, they tried to get the script a little wet in that Dalton Trumbo was brought in
Splish splash.
to type this one up in his bathtub.
Wow.
There was a writer's strike. I think Haskell Wexler was on some kind of
They would have
like,
had to put him into like a dirt bath or a sand bath.
Yeah, it would have
you
been
know what
tough
I mean?
for him.
Like that's not.
Yeah.
That's the wrong mood.
Anyway, Arthur Jacobs died of a heart attack.
in a sandpit.
Exactly. The sleeper must awaken. And then, of course, in the 70s, Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Yes.
Right.
You can watch the documentary about it. Certainly commissioned a gigantic book of concept art. He brought in lots of interesting people.
Spent a lot of money.
H.R. Giger, he spent a lot of French money all over town.
Yeah.
Getting people involved in his notion of a Dune movie, which if you want, the concept art that was produced for it is really lovely and cool to look at, I would say.
People he gathered together went on to do deeply influential work in other
he had
films.
H.R. Giger, the cartoonist Mobius, and Dan O'Bannon together. Right? Like before Alien, before anything else. That's sort of his biggest claim to fame. Obviously, he makes this giant book, sends it to studios, and studios are like, Are you crazy? We would never give you money for this.
By the way, 10%
But
of the budget.
I'll take this and this
Yeah.
and this.
Right,
Like
exactly.
They used it as a menu for science fiction film development for a
Yes.
generation.
But you just watched that documentary for the first time, and you were
Like
saying
a year ago. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
that people talk about it as like, oh my God, it's this tragedy about the greatest near miss
unmade,
film.
Right.
And
yes.
the narrative crux of the movie, this is always what I found frustrating about that movie, is just it spends so much time talking up the pitch, and then you're like, what happened? And they're like, he pitched it, and everyone said no. There was no like ransacking.
It's not like a near miss.
No. Everyone was just like, well, no, what, you want us to give you money for
It's
this?
an entertaining movie because he is an incredibly entertaining person
Yeah,
when
it's
he's
got some good
talking.
talking
My
heads in
favorite
it.
part of Jodorowsky's Dune was when he was complaining. It's like, the problem was I could never make my movie because all people ever cared about was money. And he doesn't say money. He reaches in his pocket and he pulls out some money and goes, this awful stuff. And I noticed he's like, you're holding about $1,000 in your
You're
hand,
just
dude.
walking around with that, Holly.
This is flush.
How you doing, buddy?
You really don't care about this money because you got a lot of it.
You're trying to get
pocket,
laid
at
in
least.
Park Slope at 2 a.m.?
The thing about Jodorowsky also is you watch it and you're like, okay, so how old is he? 65? And then it turns out he's like 88.
Yes.
He's so young and hot, like
Yes.
for whatever. He's still going, I think, right?
Bless
He's still
him.
going.
Yeah. God bless.
But you imagine that he maybe would have, in his mind, if people
Bless
had
the
just given
Jodorowsky
him
in his
money
passing.
and fucked off, right? That he would have gone like, and I'm just going to make this about mood. I'm not going to worry about every character explaining every bit of lingo.
Obviously, famously, he was going to have Salvador Dali play the emperor.
At like 10% of the budget going straight to him.
He did something like, I will pay you, I can't remember what it is, but like $100,000 an hour.
Yeah.
And like, that'll quote unquote make you the highest paid actor in film history, and
Right.
that no one's ever gotten paid that as an hourly rate. But we'll shoot you out in like 3 hours. I think
like
that was sort of
15
their
minutes.
plan, right?
Yeah.
Mick Jagger was going to be Fade Routh.
Right.
Keith Carradine, I think, was going to be, or David Carradine maybe,
Okay.
was going to be Leto. And of course, his own son Brontes was going to be Paul, and he had Brontes do like 2 years of kung fu for a movie that never even made
Also
past
a
the
great
big
sci-fi
stage.
name, Brontes.
Brontes Jodorowsky.
Yeah.
Stop me if I'm just late to this. And
Late for
everyone's
Dinner,
been
directed
saying,
by W.D. Richter.
well, I've
Yeah.
heard good things about that film from you.
Yeah.
If this is a conclusion that other people have come to years before me, but I'm watching this and I'm like, could any filmmaker have pulled this off at this point in time? Realistically, within the studio system, within like having the
Maybe.
track record to have a little bit of reassurance from the studio that they know to handle this thing. There's the one guy, and I'm happy that he did what he did instead.
Sure.
But in retrospect, there's the one obvious answer who in 1984 would have made sense to do Dune.
Which is
George Miller.
it's pretty early for him.
He
I
had
mean, he'd
already
be
done
cool.
Road Warrior.
Yeah, but still pretty early.
But if
Well,
you're
the
looking
thing-
at someone's second film and saying who could make Dune as their third
maybe
film,
you take Miller over
Road
Lynch,
Warrior makes a
maybe.
lot more sense than Elephant Man.
But Elephant Man was like a Best Picture.
No, I know.
nominee. Right?
A
Yeah,
masterpiece.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Road Warrior had
More of a cult.
yeah.
hit, right.
I mean, one of the things, and having just seen Furiosa,
Mhm.
which I loved,
an excellent film that all of us love for the
No, we
record.
hated it. Listen to the app.
Okay.
that's
Just
not what I
100%
read.
shitting
Okay,
on it.
whatever. I mean, try to rewrite
Saw
history
it
here.
3 times in theater.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, and this is true about Lucas too, which Lynch couldn't quite do, which is
Mhm.
like, you know where everyone is at every moment.
Yes.
You know how things, like Lynch
Miller's very
curated-
good at it.
Lynch
Yeah.
curated a beautiful, arresting, sometimes terrifying
Mhm.
space where these characters were in, but you didn't know where they were or where they were going or where the worms were or what was going on. You
And-
couldn't move them through the space.
Miller incredibly good at the just like giving you a sense of lore and history and connections and how structures work without needing to have it actually explained.
But when we talk about how Dune is unfilmable, as many people did, there are reasons for it, right? Obviously, it's very long. Obviously, it's pretty esoteric. Obviously, it's multiple different novels. There is a boy's adventure novel. There is also an ecological parable. There's tons and tons of religious nun fear. There's tons and tons of just drug stuff in it. Like, it's exactly what a novel can be, which is discursive, tangential. It's, and on top of that, though, I think the thing that really made it hard to do was that so much of the novel is interior.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And also these fucking worms.
These fucking
You know what I'm
worms.
talking about?
They're
These
big.
fucking worms.
Yeah.
They're big.
And it's not just that
And
they're
what you
big
know
and
about
hard
them
to
is they're
pull
weird
off.
and
Yeah.
big.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They're weird and big and they're phallic. When you are reading a book and you read about giant sandworms that eat sand and vomit and poop drugs,
Yeah.
and you can ride around on them, you're like, yeah, I'm all over this. This is fantastic.
Images baked into your brain that now the film has to live up to.
Well, and you can't, and yet there are just some things for the most part that when you put them in front of you,
Mhm.
they take it out of your mind's eye and put it onto a screen. It looks dumb.
Yeah.
So, like, so much of the animus behind Superman the movie and the Spider-Man TV show or whatever is like, what do these people look like in the real world? It's really hard to make superheroes in those costumes in the
Yes.
real world not look dumb.
Yeah.
Only
it
Christopher
took
Reeve could really do it. Do you know what I mean?
decades of iteration.
Yeah.
And that's the one example that worked until the late 80s.
Right.
Yes.
And those worms, setting aside the technical issue of filming worms so they look real,
And that they have to do a lot of shit.
right.
Yeah.
They're a big part of the story.
Yes.
And when you take them out of your mind's eye, even if you could make them look perfectly real, which you couldn't at the time, they look, there's a real risk of them looking dumb. And I would say the other thing, what Villeneuve could do
Mhm.
with regard to the worms, first of all, I think you're right, David, that he took it out of the interior, inner monologue and actually dramatized what was happening in the story, which
Mostly
helped.
through building it around relationships, figuring out
Right.
the right way to structure acts around interpersonal relationships. Yeah.
And he figured out a way to make those worms look good,
Yeah.
move good. Obviously, a lot more technology allows him to do that.
Obviously perfectly suited for a popcorn bucket, which the Lynch worms were not.
But even so, I would say that it might not have come off unless David Lynch's Dune existed. Like
Maybe.
the Bene Gesserit Missionaria Protectiva,
Someone had to do it incorrectly.
seeding myths throughout the
Yeah.
galaxy to prepare the way for Paul to say that he's Muad'Dib when he meets the Fremen. I feel like we've gotten this in our head enough
Mhm.
that when we see them this time, they don't look totally jarring and dumb and weird.
I would agree with that. I also think it is interesting to me. We were watching the special feature on the Arrow Blu-ray that's like a 20-minute featurette about the merchandising
Right.
efforts of Dune.
Right.
How hard they went on this movie
Yeah.
in the wake of Star Wars
Yeah.
and like blowing it out
Yeah.
with bed sheets and fucking activity books and all sorts of toys and what
Pencil
have you.
cases for
Right, which-
elementary school.
David, you had a very good slam, which is they actually only should have made merch for Poindexters. It
Should be
should
like
have just
homework.
been
Yeah,
nerd-ass
you're
shit.
right. You're right.
But they made every type of thing. And on the back of the packaging for all the toys, they used to have what they called the cross sell, where you could see all the other products in the line so you knew what you need to collect.
Yeah.
It said sandworm, deluxe sandworm.
Deluxe.
And then they put like a fucking bar over it that said top secret.
Yeah.
They
Okay,
were
cool.
in the lead up to this movie
Okay.
being like, we can't even show you a toy of the worm yet.
Right.
Because this has to be saved for the fucking
'Cause
big
it's-
screen.
And also, probably it would be illegal to send this through the mail in certain states
It looks
because this thing is so much of a penis.
It is so sexual.
Yeah.
The great failing of the toy is that the mouth is very shallow and you can't really get any practical use out of it.
Wow.
But otherwise, it looks like it's just meant for them.
David Lynch. Some other people kind of, Ridley Scott's the most obvious person who flirted with making this movie, but decided too similar to stuff I've done. I'm not going to do it. David Lynch, though.
Mhm.
Okay.
David Lynch.
David
He comes aboard. Christopher DeVore and Eric Berggren had worked with Lynch on The Elephant Man already. And so they help him kind of, draft this novel into a gigantic screenplay. Lynch does pitch, should we do 2 movies,
Mhm.
which I think is a classic pitch.
Yeah.
And that gets basically shot down.
Even with Star Wars as a model, everyone was terrified at the idea of leaving any story incomplete.
Right. Eventually, the other 2 guys leave because they're they sort of see trouble ahead, basically.
Mhm.
They're like, there's no way to make an entertaining movie that Danilo De Laurentiis is going to like with a lot of action in it and have David make a movie that David wants to make.
Sure.
Like,
They're-
they get
yes.
David Lynch, and they're
Right.
just kind of like, the navigating being faithful to this novel, making a blockbuster, and making a David Lynch movie. We just don't really see how it's going to work.
Too many masters to serve in opposite directions.
Lynch eventually submits the shooting script. It's about 135 pages long. It also, as Lynch says, has to be a PG. And so some of the quote-unquote stranger stuff has to get thrown out the window.
Uh-huh.
Now, Val Kilmer, I believe, was the first choice to play Paul Atreides, and makes a
so much
ton of
sense.
sense.
Yes.
Because he has that kind of perfection to him, right? Where you're like, it's eerie.
And the sort of
he's all
snootiness.
angular. Yes. A little like you kind of hate him.
Yes.
You kind of root for him.
But you know what I learned, and this may or may not be true, but I saw it online, that also considered for the role, another Buckaroo Banzai,
Peter Weller?
Perfect Tommy, Lewis Smith.
Interesting. Perfect Tommy Lewis Smith.
Yeah. Peter Weller would be too old.
Well, that's why I was confused.
And so is Lewis Smith, and so is Val Kilmer for that matter.
Yeah.
Kilmer's maybe, because this is no, it's right around when Top Gun, 86?
80, yeah.
So this is
He had done
pre-Top Gun.
Secret and Real Genius.
Had he done like Willow yet? Or is it,
Let's look. Let's look here.
take a look. For
that's
heaven's sake.
later. So yeah, who is he? He's
He's
in
done
The
Top
Outsiders.
Secret and Real Genius.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean,
No,
yeah.
you know what? Top Secret is this year.
Right.
Is this same year.
Obviously, Tom Cruise is also mentioned. Tom Cruise is just kind of like a hot new face at the
But
time.
he would have fit.
He probably would have fit. I think they had the fear that he's kind of too charismatic.
And one fears the mind
Yeah.
He
killer.
smiles and that's another
Sure.
thing they had to deal with. Paul Atreides Colin McLaughlin had graduated from the University of Washington. He'd never acted in a movie. Lynch doesn't apparently do traditional auditions. He kind of just meets.
What? He
and
does things his own way?
Gets
Weird.
your vibe. McLaughlin said, I had seen Eraserhead, didn't really know what to make of it. I more liked movies like The Three Musketeers.
Uh-huh.
Hey, I get it. Swords. They talk about growing up in the Northwest. They talk about red wine. And Lynch is like, I like your vibe. Read this script. Like, we'll film some scenes.
Wild.
It is wild. There's some weird shit of why didn't he go for Kilmer? Because Kilmer makes so much sense.
So much
just as
sense.
kind of like a little bit of a known entity.
But
Most
you can
commonly
understand
offered.
why someone, and look, I was trained to believe the author is dead, that authorial intention means nothing, and only the text remains. But I will say, you could appreciate a world in which David Lynch is like, well, there's this movie star that they want me to make this thing with,
Yes.
or this up-and-coming star that they want, or this kid I found in college in the Pacific
I think
Northwest.
Northwest.
it's
mold.
It's a bit more of a blank slate, and Val Kilmer's notoriously difficult.
I don't know if it was notorious back then.
But meeting with him, you could imagine how he's like,
the other thing,
this guy's got ideas of what this is going to do for his career.
Yeah, David was
versus,
like, why does this guy keep calling me his Huckleberry?
well, he is your Huckleberry if
He
you
is.
want to Paul Atreides. The other thing I think that is like, Colin McLaughlin is as close to David Lynch finds as an analog for himself
Yes.
as a young man,
Right.
right? Obviously, Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks, though, like, that's him.
But
Yeah,
clearly,
Like,
there's
everything
some
I'm
part of
reading
him-
about Twin Peaks,
Yes.
because I am now just deep in Twin Peaks, guys.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys know
Yes.
about this,
Mm.
but I'm so deep. I've seen all of Twin Peaks before, but now I'm just kind of soaking in it in a new way. And what I've learned is that, like, everything on Twin Peaks was diffused. Mark Frost did lots of stuff, obviously, but Lynch handled Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
And the words coming out of Dale Cooper's mouth, people are like, that's how he talks. Like,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
just how Lynch behaves.
Right.
And maybe he just meets this guy and is like, they're talking about the Pacific Northwest or whatever. And Lynch is like, yeah.
If I'm
you're
making
me.
a coming of age story, this is me when
Totally.
I was coming of age.
Yeah. Yeah. Lynch's Leto to Kyle's Paul.
Yes.
Orson Welles obviously is considered for the Baron.
Uh-huh.
Apparently Divine was considered.
Cool.
Wow.
Had health issues. Goes to Kenneth McMillan, who I feel like is classic. Just like, yeah, you can need a British guy to kind of yell and shit. Like,
Yeah.
he's good for that.
And does rule in this. Let's be
He's
clear.
having
Yeah.
so much fun.
He's having a
I
lot
like
of
a
fun.
completely unembarrassed performance like this.
Same.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I love what Stellan Skarsgård does so much.
Yeah.
But this guy's like the most evil guy in the world. He flies around.
I would say so.
Sure, I can do that.
He flies up to the ceiling to chomp the scenery up there.
Right, exactly. He's like, let me at it.
Yeah.
I've already chopped the whole floor. Glenn Close is number one pick for Lady Jessica.
Okay.
Makes a lot of sense.
Makes a ton of sense.
Icy,
Yeah.
she passes on it because she was displeased that when she read in the script, there was a scene where we're, quote, running away from a big worm or whatever, and the woman fell down and everyone has to come back and get her. And she was like, I don't want to be some woman they all have to rescue. Okay.
Okay.
So they go for Francesca Ennis, who I think is very good.
Yeah.
Sort of British Shakespeare. I think of her, and she's in the Polanski Macbeth, I think.
But another example of like one of the things that Villeneuve gets really right is what he sort of builds around that
She's so good.
relationship.
Yes.
Beyond just Ferguson being fucking phenomenal.
Very good at her job.
Right.
Yeah.
Watching this movie now, I was like, it's kind of insane to think that you could put that much emotional weight on this character with how she's presented in this movie.
Right.
Yes.
And he heightens her in the. Well, let's not talk about that movie.
Sure.
Let's talk about this movie.
Let's talk about this.
Jürgen Prochnow. It is funny again. Like it's like Gregory Peck, Rutger Hauer. You
Right.
see these big names, then it goes to a middle name.
Sure.
So I do think there was this automatic from a lot of the big stars with like, it's some sci-fi crap.
Well, and a lot of people that Lynch will then use again and make sense as like weird energy face people.
Sure.
But you're like, this movie is basically cast with severe Europeans.
It's true. I mean,
Which Star Wars has this interesting balance of like, those are the people in the functionary roles and the officer roles, but
Yes.
then he knows which people to let be the color.
I love Jürgen Prochnow.
I do
That
too.
guy is, he's a pillar. He's awesome.
Yeah.
He doesn't get to do a ton in this
Kind
movie.
of an insane choice for this
He gets
part.
the Sleeper Must Awaken monologue.
Yeah.
That's cool. He'd been in Das Boot. That was what he was coming
Do
off
you
of.
think when they're standing over the ocean in Caladan at the beginning of the movie, he says to Paul, "I'm really going to miss the ocean"? That's a Das Boot joke.
I've been in that fucking thing.
I had such a good time.
Like if I were in Das Boot, I'd be like, "Yeah, get me to the desert planet right quick, please."
Dry.
Yeah.
My only marching orders for my career.
Sean Young, she's a pretty hot young star, right? She's
Yeah.
getting Chani. Aldo Ray is cast as Gurney Halleck, who is,
Okay.
of course, his ex-wife is Joanna Ray, who ends up
Yes.
casting all the Lynch movies. He is too drunk not to speak ill of his severe alcoholism, but he is fired
He's
from the
impaired.
movie.
He's not able to
Sure.
do
Right.
the work.
So he is replaced by Patrick Stewart, who owns in this movie
Yes.
with the little that he gets to do.
Yeah.
John Hurt was cast as Dr. Yue, and then Dean Stockwell. It's just so funny that you're like, well, of course Dean Stockwell's in it. He knows David Lynch. No.
Right.
This is where
This
they
is
meet.
this is where it
what I'm
all
saying.
And then he
happened.
finds the better
It's
role
the
for him.
same
It's
thing with
Everett
McLaughlin
McGill.
for
It's
me.
like, yeah,
Right.
well, he knew Everett McGill. No.
Yeah.
No.
But I did watch this and I was like, how is John Hurt not in this? Like, John Hurt's the exact guy he should have carried over.
John Hurt does feel like,
Hopkins he should have carried over, although they
Yeah.
famously didn't really get along.
but right, Hurt, it does feel like, why isn't, apparently Hurt, whatever, had some, scheduling disarray or whatever.
Yeah.
There's reasons for this.
You have Freddie Jones, of course, from Elephant Man, is the one actor he does bring over from that movie.
Who's good?
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing the most
Who for
disgusting
how
man
lot?
in the world. Yes.
And look, there's
You
a
just
lot
don't
of
like his
competition.
big bushy brows?
It's true.
There's
It's
a lot
true.
of competition.
It's
in
true.
I mean, you're talking about Macmillan's got boils all over his face
Yes.
and his monster.
Yes.
You're talking about Thufir Hawat with the big eyebrows. Those eyebrows are gross.
I'm being too mean to the eyebrows.
Brad Dourif
They're
also.
gross.
They're not nice. Yeah.
Brad Dourif also has the big eyebrows, and he's also in Blue Velvet later.
And he
Yes.
also has the stained, because there's another litany. It's by Will Alone. I set my mind in motion. I drink the juice provides the stain. Because that was made up too for the
It's
movie.
cool though,
Yeah,
right?
it's very cool.
But you do, like, Brad
The
Dourif
juice
shows
of the
up in
Safu
this.
that gives them superhuman intelligence and computing power turns them into mentats.
Short of
I'm just saying that for anyone who's
No,
listening.
but I
very
do
impressive.
think no,
Who
John.
doesn't
I
know
think
what
you're
we're
right.
talking about.
I don't think anyone watches David Lynch's Dune and understands that there are no computers in this world, and people have taken the place of
Does not
computers.
come across.
That's an
Doesn't-
important point.
And I think
Villeneuve
someone,
communicates it immediately.
right, someone might even say it aloud, like for
Yeah.
all I know, because there's so much information being thrown at you. But right, you just kind of like, yeah, what's he? He's like a weirdo guy. I get it. He's got
Yeah.
big hair. Okay, I don't.
Right.
I'm not thinking about
Yet
it.
another weirdo.
Right, but I'm like pulling up Wikipedia. Most of the characters I can track, and I'm like, who's Stephen McKinley Henderson? Like, this
Right,
doesn't
right.
seem. Oh well, Bluto. You made the joke right before we started recording, but Paul Smith
Yeah,
as the
As-
Beast
as
Raban.
Beast
as
Raban.
Raban.
Who of course plays Bluto in Robert Altman's Popeye.
Yes,
But then there's weird stuff. It's like
He's bringing
Max
a lot
von
of Bluto energy to this role, though.
He
I kept
is.
wanting him to burst out and, I mean, you know what I mean.
trying to describe it. It's almost like he's got a shaved Bluto vibe.
It's just you have something like Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
I know he's not a superstar, but that's a very big, serious actor.
At this point, the man has been in major films for 20 years.
He pops in as Liet Keynes. He does like two
Yeah.
scenes. He's good.
Yeah.
And then you have like Everett McGill as Stilgar, who like Everett McGill basically just played like heavies.
Yes.
He wasn't a big actor at all. He'd been in like Brubaker, the Redford movie.
Mhm.
And he's getting, I would say, one of the biggest roles in the movie, although he also doesn't get enough to do. It's just funny how they sorted through it. I don't think any of the casting is bad.
Can I say something about Max von Sydow in this movie?
You sure can.
He did a really good job, especially delivering the lines with regard to the still suits. Feces and urine are processed in the thigh pads.
He somehow delivers
also
it in a
gonna get
way that
processed.
doesn't make you giggle.
And it's like, again, this is like every time I would watch this movie, I would see another thing and I would just be like, the sheer audacity. This is a line that was written and then someone had to transcribe it to the captions because I got to watch movies with captions
The
now.
like cat milking box.
So the shit in the pants is in the book,
Yeah. It recycles your body's waste and turns it into water.
but it's not in Denis' movie.
I
It's
mean,
just
nobody
pee-pee.
says
They-
like
no one
your
says
thighs do poop. You're
Yeah,
right. But I
they're-
mean, it's where you
He
else
makes
think
the
it's
smart
going.
choice
it's not
to
like saying
not
your shit in
really
your pee
spell
is
it
going to
out.
get
Because that's-
processed through your cargo shorts.
I got really held up on that. I had to
The
pause it,
second
and I
you
was like,
say it
so
directly,
the
yes.
adult men and women are shitting their pants while in the desert.
Constantly.
Constantly.
Every conversation
Always,
they're having.
Well,
Yeah.
you can't just let that stuff go. It's got moisture in it.
Yeah. That's valuable stuff.
Sure. Okay. Well,
good
that
stuff.
all checks out. All
Yeah.
right.
But yeah, Max von Sydow is exactly the kind of guy who can make that sing, right?
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart, with not a lot of screen time, clearly shows himself facile enough with this kind of shit that, like, you have to imagine this is the performance that gets him Picard.
I would imagine, yes.
There's
it
no
puts
way
him in
he
the
ends up
world.
with that part without this, right?
I mean,
even if this didn't make his career instantly,
obviously, it's a huge benefit to him that he was on screen in a big movie, right? There's no
but
like
just
Yeah, but
the
he's
sort
got-
of poise and the gravitas of saying this shit like it means something.
And yeah, and he pulls it off, and you feel completely convinced that he's in this world and he's part of this world.
he's
Right.
great in this movie. I love Patrick Stewart.
And he's got
so
to do a
much.
whole fight scene hidden behind proto CGI bogus shields, which
Yep.
again was something that I would think about every time I see it. And it's like the fucking audacity.
I mean,
Yes.
it's just
like you
if
can't
people
even
haven't
see these actors.
Yeah.
if people haven't already picked up, taken their normal popcorn buckets home with them right after.
Right.
And another thing,
Yeah.
it's also called Dune, or after, then when it's like, engage your shield, and then they turn into
Block,
like,
block, 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 block.
Yeah,
they
block,
they
turn
turn into
into
Minecraft
Playmobil
characters
figures.
or
Yes,
whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I love how it looks
Yeah.
because you're like you say, the audacity of it, but I cannot imagine people were punching the screen with excitement seeing
No.
the blocks go like.
But you say
When
not-
I saw
oh,
Star Wars
And
as
then
a
him being
child-
like, "You got your knife through there," and I'm like, "I can't see that."
I don't
Like,
know.
Yeah, exactly.
If you say so.
Good, the slow blade penetrates the shield.
Oh,
But
great.
you would
The
have
blade's slow. Great for an action movie.
Well, I mean, when I saw Star Wars, I was old enough to see it in the theaters, and I don't remember a moment where I felt like I was seeing something new. I felt like what I was seeing was something I've known my whole life.
That's the magic of Star Wars.
like
Yes.
I just felt like
Yeah,
I
it
knew
is.
this world instantly.
Yeah.
But with seeing Dune, that makes it so unsettling.
Yes.
Among other things,
Yeah.
is this sense of like, oh, I've never seen anything like this before in my life.
Well, here was another thing I was thinking about while watching this. The Lucas magic in that original film of just everything feeling like only a couple of steps away from a real world analog that makes a ton of sense, right?
Right.
Whether things that were reflective of society in the 1970s or things that are just part of like the most popular myth and lore that we all grow up with. You're like, okay, knights, samurai, soldiers, farms, desert, like everything just feels like it's just a little bit interesting,
Right.
a little bit mashed up, but real strong, like kind of like centering pillars around it. This movie is engaging in the sort of like gilded sci-fi of
Right.
everything being like very heightened and very like hermetic and very self-serious.
And let's take these ideas and stretch them out and make them as weird
Yes.
and intellectual as possible. Like, we're going to wear personal shields, but if you move, and we're going to have hand-to-hand knife combat
Yeah.
in the future. And if you move your knife slowly, that's how you get through it. It's all this sort of counterintuitive science fiction stuff, which is why Dune is science fiction, Star Wars is fantasy.
Now, mind you, even though it is still fantasy, the prequels get into a lot more of this vibe, and people largely react with boring.
Right.
Why am I watching like fucking Senate meetings?
Right.
Why am I
Right.
seeing people walk very slowly through grand halls?
Right.
You know, and like most times sci-fi tries to go into this arena. I think it's a goofier movie, but Jupiter Ascending has the same thing of like palace intrigue.
Yeah, because
And
it's
like
all
grand
it's all
gold
metaphor
halls.
for political condition, human condition, ecological condition, which gets lost completely in all of the adaptations.
Yes.
Because there's no real way to handle it because no one wants to talk about it. But yes, it's all this metaphoric, what's the cerebral shit
Yes.
that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and sort of like trying to treat it with a sense of like Shakespearean self-seriousness.
Right.
I think I agree with you, David, that no one in this movie is flat out bad.
No.
But the problem is that like you need to think. I mean, you were saying shorthand casting is what Villeneuve does, but the other thing that like only a few of the actors in this movie, Sydowd and Stewart being perfect examples of the difficult balancing act of can you invest a sense of gravitas into this stuff that could be seen as really silly or dry,
Right.
while simultaneously putting some spin on the ball. Like you also have to make it a little theatrical, a little fun, because what you're saying isn't innately that dramatic. And it's a lot of like classical training, Royal Shakespeare.
Yes.
Can you just have control of your voice and rhythms in this way? That like Jürgen Prochnow is like tremendous presence, but is doing a very straightforward, like
no
I'm just
fun.
playing him like a real guy.
I think Kyle, as much as I love Kyle MacLachlan in general, he's good at the earnestness. He is sort of surprisingly, not that surprising.
That's when
It's
he's
sort of
best, at the beginning of the movie.
And he doesn't have much flair later on. The movie is selling him out at that point by being like, and then he became a messiah that like completely runs an army
Right.
where you're like, he does? Like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you know, he's not like embarrassing at the end when he's saying like, you don't control me anymore, basically. But it's like the Chalamet performance is that like you need to be scared of this person.
Yes.
And what I liked about the casting of Chalamet, first of all, is that he looks 15.
He
looks like small and
right.
fragile.
He does, but
He's
And that
he's
brings
got
a lot more to the character.
bratty child energy, like
And- yeah.
genuine,
And then his transformation
he
into
has
this.
presence.
Yeah.
I mean, not his transformation into this powerful, confident person.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's got more time to develop that.
This is the thing. The biggest issue is always going to be like,
Time.
this movie just has to cut ahead to then he became a really, really charismatic magic man.
Right.
But also, this movie is never going to let him become the slightly scary figure. They're never going to say we're adapting Buna. Jesus
Boona.
Christ,
We're adapting Boona.
We're doing
Boona.
Dune as one
Diablo
big budget.
Cody's boon.
Diablo Cody's Boona. One big budget movie that we want to sell a bunch of bed sheets. And at the end of the movie, everyone in the audience is going to walk out and be like, man, Paul Atreides kind of sucks, huh?
Yeah, he turned into a galactic
right.
dictator.
I would say
So he also can't go as hard in the performance.
he cannot. The biggest failing of this film beyond its general rushness is that it basically is uninterested in the largest point of Herbert's writing, which is like, if you create a hero like this, he becomes a messiah. And that is like that is just death. Like he's at the head of something that's just war and destruction, and like this is scary.
Right.
And Villeneuve's very invested in that in his adaptation, obviously. But this one has to have this happy ending where he's like, water! And then you're like, dude is saved! Now there's water everywhere. And so it can't end with like, but what does it mean that Paul runs like an army of like kind of zealots? Like, is that good? Is that bad? The movie's just kind of like, what do you mean? It's great. They fucking killed the emperor. I hate that guy.
Yeah,
They don't even kill him, but we beat him. Beat his ass.
That's one of the reasons why the novel is sort of unfilmable, right? Because by the time you're making movies in the post-Star Wars world, you can't. The novel, undoes its own premise. It takes the idea of heroism and says it's actually horrible.
Yeah, and I recommend you read Dune Messiah, which does even more.
Maybe
of that.
I will.
Yeah.
But you can do that as that's the point the middle movie ends on. You can do that if chapter 2 out of 3 is that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, this movie decides to have an ending, and that's a fair decision because, you don't know that you're making more of them.
Yeah,
but the ending's a little flat because he's just like, I'm thinking really hard and I made water. And you're like, oh, you could do that? Yes, I can.
And that solves everything?
Sure.
Right.
It doesn't even have him marrying Irulan, which is like a, key dramatic moment at the end of the book.
It is bizarre how
It's weird that
irrelevant she
she's
is to the
even in
movie
the
for how
movie.
much she opens it.
Right. And then like the whole point of seeding her is like, yes, this is one of the sacrifices he's going to have to make. He'll enter into this political marriage. Doesn't happen. You have stuff like Thurfer Hawat getting kidnapped, getting bound by, whatever,
Right,
captured by the Harkonnens.
Okay, that's right. He gets brought to their horrible basement.
Yes. And they're like, right,
He's
here's
he's given a poison, and then Sting hands him a cat that's duct taped to a rat.
He sure does.
Inside a space cat carrier.
Right.
And you're going to have to milk this cat for the antidote to the poison.
And like, that's, insane. And like, obviously just like an insane David Lynch idea. It's not from the book.
No.
But it's also the last you see of him.
Right.
You're seeing that and you're like, oh, okay, so maybe Thurfer will like escape this and maybe come back and help them in some way. And so it's like, no, we don't check in with him again. Assume he's milking cats.
Just assume he's milking cats.
This is a movie.
Like he could have said Thufir died in the invasion.
Sure, anything.
Do you know what I mean? And we
Yes.
certainly don't see Thufir Hawat in any more of the Villeneuve film. And
No,
that doesn't show up.
Villeneuve shot stuff with him in part 2 and decided not to include it because
But
he
you
was
have
like,
to
it's
understand
too
that like David Lynch
superfluous.
was like, I don't want to kill him because I need that cat.
That's what I'm saying.
That cat rat sequence. That's kind of important to me.
It's such a clear failing of this movie that it is really hard to track who is still alive in any given scene.
You don't usually know when people die.
No.
And like,
If someone's not on screen, you're like, are they done?
and right. And then stuff like Harkonnen giving him the cat, right? It's like, well, that demonstrates that Harkonnen's a bad dude, which you might not have picked up on before now.
That's already you're almost done with the movie by the time he gets that.
And also,
cat.
every time he's on screen, he flies 10 feet into the air going like, I love evil! Give me someone to eat!
And to be fair, David Lynch complains a lot about how he didn't have final cut.
Sure.
But apparently Dino De Laurentiis or whoever was making the final did have final cut. Was like, yeah, let's keep that cat rat thing in.
That's stuff that I just wonder if they fought with him and Lynch was like, please can I just have the cat? And they were like, I mean, it's 2 minutes. I guess you can have the cat. We were cutting a lot of other stuff.
But it also has glacial pacing. And it has his very
Especially
deliberate sort of like
the first half
off
especially.
rhythm.
Right.
Yes.
When I started rewatching it, because I'd seen it so many times, I'm like, I feel bad, but I'm going to try to watch this at like 1.5 speed.
Sure.
And then I'm watching it at 1.5 speed. I'm like, this is really slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
a lot of
like,
pauses.
so Lynch, one of the things, so there's a big book that just came out called A Masterpiece in Disarray by a guy named Max Every, which is
Right. Some of
huge-
the stuff I'm reading from is from.
It's huge. And I've not read the whole thing. I've dipped into it. It's a huge oral history. There's also a book by a guy who was on set who was trying to create a documentary about it named George Godwin. Kenneth George Godwin. Anyway, there's a lot of documents out there.
Sure.
One of the things that I kind of picked up from this was that as they went on in Mexico, as the studio started to
So
freak
the
out.
film shot in Mexico, just FYI, because it was cheap.
Yeah. They got more for their buck.
Yeah.
They were filming often in something called the Dog's Graveyard or something.
Right.
Sounds-
The hope for budget, of course, was 30 mil. It eventually cost 42.
Right.
So quite over.
And as it went on, like what people were saying was David Lynch was getting upset about how much he had to pull back,
Mhm.
and that instead he would focus in on certain little scenes like the cat rat and be like, this is where I'm going to leave my fingerprint on this.
Right.
Which feels like a real thing that carries over into his films after this, which is just like, if an idea interests me,
Right.
I'm going to spend as much time on it as I want.
Yeah.
Even if
Absolutely.
other people would view this as like a sidetrack, the kind of bit off topic.
And is he
rant.
wrong? Because when you think about it, what are we all talking about?
Well,
That cat
exactly.
taped to a rat.
Exactly.
So JJ read the 500-page book, A Masterpiece in Disarray.
Must be nice.
Our researcher. And he's fired for reading that long
Of course.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, please, we didn't
behavior.
ask you
Yeah,
to
what
do
a
that.
waste.
And he says his summary of the production that from reading this is basically like Dune is not really a runaway disaster. It was just a gigantic undertaking that maybe everyone had underestimated a little bit. This is not a movie where on set people are like at each other's throats.
This is JJ talking.
Yeah, he's sort of summarizing,
Yeah.
it's more a thing of like we've all bitten off a little more we can chew here.
And when you
Yes.
hear
As Lynch
like
puts
Sean
it-
Young talk about that time, I mean, there were flare-ups and stuff, but basically it was a kind of summer camp. People got along.
Sure.
Yeah, and they're all in it together a little bit. They had a thing where Apogee, which was the special effects company that was John Dykstra's, who's obviously a big figure at that time, leaves the movie early, and in comes Barry Nolan, who works at a lower budget. Maybe that had some issues. The big issues come after shooting the movie. Like that's when suddenly Lynch gives a 3.5-hour cut to De Laurentiis.
Mhm.
Frank Herbert saw it and liked it.
Okay.
Dino De Laurentiis, and I'm sure he said this in a normal tone of voice, found it, quote, boring.
Uh-huh.
So Lynch is like, okay, let me give it to 3 hours, okay?
Mhm.
And De Laurentiis is
No, let me
like
get it to
2 hours 15.
right.
No, but De Laurentiis is like 3 hours unacceptable.
Right.
Like way
Okay.
too long.
3 was his first counter.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
are you crazy? We
Yeah.
are going to rip the guts out of this thing.
Uh-huh.
Lynch says, I never hated being in Mexico, but I got real crazy. But when we came back to LA, because the time we got to the editing room, the writing was on the wall. It was horrible. It was a nightmare what was being done to truncate it, basically.
Mhm.
The voiceovers were added for this,
Right.
right? Just to explain things. And Dino, I think, is just going off you need to make a regular movie for me. Sorry.
Please.
Like this needs to be,
Regular.
this is a big movie, it was expensive, it needs to be commercial, it can't be 3 hours long.
Yeah.
We don't make those movies right now.
And I heard somewhere, or read somewhere that part of it was like if it has to be 2:15 so we don't lose a showing in the
I think
theaters.
Almost
the
definitely.
longer your
Yeah.
movie is, obviously, the less times you can show it during the day. And yeah.
It's funny that this has always been this theory. When a movie is too long, the studios are like, fuck, we're losing money because we're showing it 2 times fewer than every other movie playing right now. And then you look at the top 10 films of all time and snapshot almost any year.
Sure.
The majority of the top 10 films of all time are like 3 hours long.
Well, here's the thing, Griffin. Everyone's wrong about everything.
This is true.
That is so true.
Yep.
Anytime someone decides that they're right about something, they're almost certainly
in
wrong.
fact,
But
wrong.
it's not even just like, oh, well, in the 50s, 3-hour epics were popular. You're like,
Right.
it's still fucking Avengers Endgame and Avatar
Yeah.
overtook Gone with the Wind and Lawrence of Arabia, you know?
Now,
Yeah.
Universal distributed this film, and indeed, apparently, they were less afraid of the 3-hour runtime. And Tom Mount, who ran Universal, saw the longer cut and says, it's better. It's more David's version. I think the cuts didn't help it. I think the bravado that David baked into it got curtailed in a deleterious way. Movies hurt if you fuck them up, which is,
That's like
Great
the
way to
Elaine
put
May
it.
ecology line.
right.
Yeah.
But Dino is the one who's like, no. Like, that's 3 hours is just too long. This makes it all the crazier that the next movie David Lynch makes is with Dino De Laurentiis.
Yes.
But that's truth.
showbiz.
That is showbiz.
But it's, let's find the absolute smallest size for a movie where he'll just let me be David Lynch. We talked about
Yes.
in our Elephant Man episode, John,
Hmm.
when they were developing that movie, Lynch was like, and of course I will do the makeup. Like his plan was to do the makeup effects entirely himself because he was used to working that way
Right.
on Elephant Man.
Right.
Or not Elephant Man, Eraserhead.
Right.
Right? And they were just like, you will? And he's like, yes, I did them all for my old movie. And they're like, this is like the lead character in a complicated narrative film. It's going to be an incredibly complicated prosthetic that has to match a historical man.
Yeah.
And like worked on it really hard and really far along until he finally was like, this has gotten the better of me. And they were like, you have to let go, and brought in a professional. You could imagine for a guy who was so used to, I'm in charge, I'm touching every element of a film. It's a struggle for me to let someone else do the makeup. Was never going to come out of an experience like Dune feeling good.
Hmm.
Even if he got everything he wanted, a production of this size is like running a giant corporation.
yes.
It's like mounting like an army to attack like a months-long war. And there's no way, even if everyone is following his vision, that he's going to feel that level of control. And like he never gets close to anything being this size again.
No.
Not only does he never try to make something of this
I-
scale, but like he keeps his budgets pretty fucking under control.
Twin Peaks: The Return is the only other thing he made that cost lots and lots of money, I feel like.
And that costs a lot of money because it was 16 hours long.
correct. And,
Right.
God bless him.
Yeah.
But that movie, but Twin Peaks: The Return does not have crowds of people charging at a pyramid or whatever.
Yes.
This is a different kind of scale. Toto, I just want to shout out,
Please. Shout out Toto.
They
We were
had just
talking
done
about him a
Toto
lot
4.
before we started recording.
Toto 4 is the album that has Africa.
We were trying to Toto pill Ben.
Surely you've heard of
And,
Africa.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
It's the Weezer song. That Toto got a time machine, went back in time and recorded it before Weezer. But of course, it's a Rivers Cuomo original.
Ben was being derisive of Toto, which is fair.
Hmm.
Bad name.
Yeah.
It is a bad name. It's
It's a
kind
very
of a
bad
tough.
name.
You know how bands pick a name and then that's their name, and then
Yeah.
obviously sometimes they're like, "Ooh, this name sucks. Like, let's change it." Right? But it is like, it must suck to just get stuck with Toto.
And you're just Toto forever.
And then you release like one album and you're like, fuck, now we have to always be Toto, right?
Are there any other bands named after fictional dogs?
Probably. Were you ever in a band, Ben?
Was I ever in a band?
Yes.
No.
That's a bummer. I was hoping you'd been in some band called like, Bone Fuck.
Yeah. Do you play any instruments?
I was a band kid.
Right. Oh,
Right. Well,
of course you played tuba.
You played
Why are you gesturing
brass.
to me? Because you sense
you
band
were-
kid in
Yeah,
me?
you were a band kid.
Yeah, I did.
But you
I
were
was
in
more
the
of a
woodwinds.
chamber music woodwind guy.
Oh, wow.
Not a marching, but I did play in the band. You're right. Nice
What specific
nice to
woodwind
see you. Nice to be
instrument?
seen.
Yeah.
What's that? Clarinet.
Clarinet.
Single reeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trumpet, and then at one point, my music teacher took a look at me. I was a fat kid, and he said, "You know what? I think tuba would be good for you."
This
Why? Because
frame
it would be
could support
funnier?
a tuba.
It's a
I think
funnier
it-
visual.
I think it was more that I could hold,
could hold
it.
it.
you could hold it. Okay.
Yeah,
They're
I
heavy,
could
right?
carry it around. They're heavy. They're big. They're cumbersome. But
Toto-
I wasn't ever. I was only with I hung out with kids who were in bands. I went to local punk shows, but I never had the patience to learn how to play guitar or
practice.
bass.
You know, it's a
Yeah.
good name for a band. Local punks.
True.
Toto, do you guys like the Toto score? I love
Yeah, I
the
think it
Toto
rules.
score. It
Toto
rules.
and Brian Eno.
Brian Eno contributed one piece of music. Toto is very mad that he's even given prominent, crediting.
So it's like the Danny Elfman, Alf Clausen relationship.
Yeah, I think
He came up with the main
Eno's
theme and they
hot
did
stuff,
all that.
obviously,
Sure.
and so they want to get his name up there. But this is, Toto.
Which one did he
bristles
know,
a
right?
little.
Did he? You're like, brah, 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 or is
No,
that
that's
Toto?
Toto.
That's Toto, huh?
That's Toto, baby.
I don't know which one you know.
But they credit Eno as main theme by.
Yes, I think he did the.
Pretty good.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Someone else can tell me. Toto doesn't like it because I think Toto thinks it makes it look like Brian Eno kind of ghost wrote a lot of the music, right?
Sure.
And then Toto came in and laid some tracks down.
Yeah,
but
no, I think the score rips. I mean, it's what you said. You walked in and the fucking DVD menu was playing, and you were like, every time I think, how could this not be a masterpiece?
Right.
And I do feel that way of if you look at almost any individual image from this film, if you watch any 30-second excerpt, if this movie were projected at a bar,
Which is where
yeah, I take it
I
back.
s-
This is
yeah.
the only thing that Eno did. This shit. The
Yeah,
movie
okay.
being-
Yeah.
yeah. Toto did all the main themes and stuff, right?
anytime you hear a sick guitar riff.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Well, that's a lot of-
wow.
They were big session musicians for Steely Dan and bands like that.
Boss Skags.
And they united as a band. And of course, their first album had Hold the Line, which is probably another song you know.
I mean, I
the
started
line.
listening through, and I realized they had a ton of songs I've heard
Top
on
5
classic
hits.
radio
Right,
or
exactly.
classic rock radio.
Classic rock radio hits.
in terms of how successfully this movie realizes an entire world visually.
Worlds?
Worlds.
But
I'm
mostly
sorry,
do. Mostly do.
I keep making this mistake. I was like, this is one of the few movies to fully kind of achieve for me the power of Metropolis, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, where I just watch it and every single I fucking can't believe this exists.
Right.
Fritz Lang
I
is from
can't believe
Metropolis.
they made
Yeah.
this, right?
Not, Zack Snyder's Metropolis.
Thank you. Metropolis has an incredibly simple story.
Sure.
That is very sort of allegaic.
Right.
You know,
Don't turn on robot.
Yeah, there's a pretty robot. Don't turn it on.
the human heart's important. It has one point it keeps making over and over and over again, which
Right.
allows it to stretch itself into this epic scale and venture into all these different areas and
Yeah,
be a little narratively wide ranging, because you're they keep on underlining it's only about one pretty simple, easy to follow thing.
Right.
I do feel a lot of times Blu-rays will have these cuts where it's you can watch the movie just with the score and no dialogue.
Right.
Or just score and sound effects. I don't know if you took all the dialogue out and I was just hearing Toto and the ambient droning that I'd be able to follow the plot.
No,
But
right.
I do think if I were watching that, I'd go, man, with the dialogue, this must be the greatest film ever made.
You would be able to track these people are bad.
Yes.
This person is good. Right? You
Yeah.
would at least maybe get the
You get
broadest
energy.
strokes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you just imagine, well, with the words, I'd probably understand all of this, and then it would fucking rule
words are
my
what-
world.
The words are what ruin it.
The whole thing.
And you're still so, I mean,
true.
I agree. It's like, it's so effective in pieces.
In pieces, it is astonishing.
And, when I came in, you were screening the rat cat scene,
Yeah.
which gets me every time. And for the first time ever, I noticed Jack Nance, Eraserhead himself, is in the background eating a hard-boiled egg for some reason.
He is. He's
Just going to town.
It's so
Just like,
obviously lovely that Lynch used Nance, right? Over and over. But it's especially funny that he's in this one. It's like, who do you play? It's like, you're just in the scenes with the Harkonnens, just
made-
in
he
another
he made up the
costume.
character for Jack
food.
Nance
Yeah,
to give
they
him
did.
to give him work.
Stuff to do.
Okay, you're playing the music still, right? Or am I just hearing
You're just
something?
hearing
You're
it,
just
baby.
hearing it in your head.
The sleeper must awaken, Ben.
Fuck.
Ben,
Jesus.
You've tuned in.
I'm doing the hand.
you take
You're
any
good.
spice before recording?
You're going to places that terrify us.
Are you spicing
I
it
mean,
up?
my eyes are completely blue. So
Yes. We should also mention, speaking of you doing spice, this very weekend is your birthday, and you've decided to celebrate your birthday by doing hot ones.
that's
Now,
correct.
we've mentioned this on a couple
I
episodes
am doing
now.
the Hot Ones challenge
Wow,
to
which will air
myself.
well after
Yeah.
his birthday.
Wow.
Well, but it's a thread we have to establish. Ben is going to do the full hot ones lineup and have all of his friends write questions that he will answer.
During the hot ones.
A
During the
room
hot
of his
ones.
loved ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very scared.
Oh, it'll be fine. They're
It's
all
fine.
fine except for Damam, which sucks.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what everyone
I'm kind of, I think more now just like, well, I don't know if I should do bathroom talk, but I'm worried about the second act.
Yeah.
I'm worried about
I mean,
book 2.
Yeah,
is
maybe
right. My drift.
right. Maybe you got to just have a heart out, right? Kind of
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm feeling some rumbling, and it's time for everyone to go right now. I'm calling the cops.
Maybe like rent a hotal room very close to your apartment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
just right. Yeah.
Many men have tried and failed, tried and died.
Mm.
That's what you're in for. Water of lifetime for you, buddy.
So Dune is about the known universe is ruled by the
Oh, yeah.
Emperor
We're about
Shaddam IV. Look, we've talked about a lot of
15-ish.
Yeah, I don't think we can really.
What are things in Dune we have yet to talk about in the film that we might want to touch on?
Well, I think we can mirror the movie in that we'll just be like, there's Paul and he's like
Right.
this guy, and there's this guy, he floats around.
the Paul narrative is coherent,
Yeah.
abridged,
basically. Yeah.
Basically coherent.
but it's
But-
young
but-
man.
Yes.
He's with his family. His family is betrayed.
Yeah.
He goes into the desert with his mother. He meets Stilgar. Does Stilgar take one look at him and basically go like, yeah, you're that kid I was talking about. This entire legion belongs to you, basically. You
Yeah,
rock.
there you
You're
go.
awesome.
What do you want us to call you? And he's like, I don't know. What do people call people here?
I don't know.
That actually
can I
drives me
choose
crazy.
Can I
Right.
choose 5 different names?
Yeah, when
Yes.
he's like, how are you doing? You'll be called Usold in our language. That means
Usold.
the base. And any other names you want. Can I be called Maudib? Great answer, buddy. Anyway.
But this whole
And then
like,
Virginia Metz
yes.
is like, hey, no,
The glossary thing of like Arrakis, which we also call Dune. Let's make it clear we have 2 names for the same thing. I talk about this a lot, but a lot of my relationship with my 90-year-old grandmother
How dare
is
you? That
me
woman
doing.
is 81
I'm sorry,
years old.
my 45-year-old grandmother
Sure.
is doing tech support for her.
Yes.
And
Right.
so often I go out and I fix her devices, whatever streaming service isn't working or whatever. And she goes, why was it doing this? And every time I make this choice where I'm like, if I explain to her what I just solved, it will confuse her so much, the answer,
Yeah.
Right. You don't even want to say
that
it.
she will no longer trust it.
Right.
And I'll just either make up something or I'll go, you actually don't want me to explain it. Just
Yeah.
be happy it's working right now.
Yeah.
And it's that thing you said of like glazing over.
Yeah.
Where the second a movie is setting up by being like, here is like what this is, but also it's also this, but it's also this. But forget that. Just think about the first thing unless we mention the other 2 things.
Right.
You're like, you're telling me not to give a shit about this.
Yeah.
a little bit.
That's why it works better in little parts.
Yep.
When you meet the Harkonnens, you obviously get that they are evil.
Original title
because-
for the movie.
Meet the Harkonnens.
Yep.
You can tell they're evil because Kenneth McMillan has boils all over his face and
Mhm.
is like, ah. But I don't think you really get much more.
No.
I like the look of
Love
the crazy, the open mouthed sort of building that they're in.
Oh, the baby face
Right.
Yeah,
smokestack.
that's cool.
But so funny
Yeah.
when you compare to the Villeneuve movie where it's like these people exist in black and white. They are joyless.
Right. I love the Villeneuve take on it
Right.
so
Oh,
much.
In
Yeah,
this, it's
yeah,
like they
yeah.
are the most colorful people in the world. They're all like fat kings.
The gentleman to evil is like
Right.
basically what they're like. Yes.
Every scene with the
fun.
Harkonnens is like the scene in the first Austin Powers where all the bad guys laugh for too long and it doesn't cut.
Yes. Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
What else is going on in Dune? I mean, that's basically it. There's not too much devoted to like the politics of the planet, right? Like the who the Fremen are, what they're doing there, how long they've been there. It's just kind of like they say there's Fremen.
There's no space for it.
There's no.
Yeah,
and Peter Berg said that he was going to scrape out all of the weird stuff and focus on just the boys' adventure. But really, that's what David Lynch did, surrounding it with weird stuff. And
But then
I
Lynch
be
is like,
here.
let's have 10 minutes to meet a guild navigator, which is not even in the book.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's things that Lynch obviously is just so animated by, and he should be. It looks cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in the way he talks about his creative process, where it's like, I had a dream where an image came to me and I spent hours trying to unpack it. Like, it's clear that certain things he just latched onto, but this movie's too busy to allow the space for that and also everything it wants to accomplish
and
narrative.
What Lynch approaches and gets as deep as he probably can into it is what you identified, David, which is this idea that the sleeper must awaken, that there is an inner journey that Paul goes through.
Right. That we all must go through probably.
Right.
But that he's identifying with Paul's journey, awakening.
Yeah.
You know, from boyhood to manhood.
And there's an element of that in the book. The problem is the book just has too many. It's about too many things.
The book is about a lot of things.
And one of the things that the book is about is a bad land deal. Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
you know, I think that it's interesting that there's this history of this movie being unfilmable, quote unquote, and these big personalities all kind of thought, am I going to be the one to do it?
Mm-hmm.
The book is also about a guy who's like tempted. Duke Leto is like,
Right.
I'm being given this plan.
I know
do it
this
all?
is a trap.
I know this is a
I know
trap,
I'm being set up to
but
fail.
I can. I'm
what
the
if I
one.
can figure it out?
I'm the one who's going to crack the Dune code.
I can solve the war in the Middle East.
Yeah,
Like, it's
right.
really, yeah.
But that's also with the Bene Gesserit, not to get too nerdy about Dune, but
Do
maybe
it.
I
There
can
we
for a
go.
minute or two. You know, the Bene Gesserit have a plan, right?
They
Where
got a
they're
plan.
like, we have been working for
I'd love hang on,
multiple
hang on.
generations.
Love to hear the plan. Go ahead.
Right?
Tell me.
You know, we have been seeding throughout history, you know, images of prophecy and stuff throughout the world, throughout the universe, but also we've been like breeding our perfect savior, right? He's coming.
Right.
Mhm.
And
And
what's
then-
he gonna do exactly?
They think they can control him, obviously, and then of
But
course
what's he gonna do exactly? What's this
What's he gonna do when he
Quizad
gets there?
What's he gonna do for me lately? What's he gonna do?
you tell me.
I don't know that. I don't know the answer.
He's going to go where they can't go.
okay. What
I
does
mean,
that mean?
Well, so I mean, if
Well, it's a place
he can
that
be a traveler.
they can't go.
He can be in many places at once.
he can, well, he's the bridging of the way. The Kwisatz Haderach. He can access the memories of everybody,
and
right?
that's what's gonna do what?
Well, that
How's
is
that gonna help?
obviously the Bene Gesserit. Now I'm like defending the Bene Gesserit. I'm like, excuse me, the Bene
I'm all
Gesserit had
for
lots
it.
of good ideas. Right.
But
they're-
this is something that this is where, I'm hoping that you've gone to places that I can't go because I've thought about this and I can't quite get there.
They-
I'm
I
gonna
can't
pee
figure it
while
out.
you're arguing.
They
about
want
this.
a
Hopefully our
messiah.
toilet's working again.
yeah, maybe you can get it flushed. They're
Oh,
they want.
don't waste your water. Don't waste your water. Don't waste it.
Griffin, just do it in your pants.
Just do it in your pants. It'll be processed in your thigh pads.
They think they can create a messiah that they control. Right? It's the ultimate sort of folly of religion. They're basically a religious
Right.
order of like, yes, we can guide the world to follow this messianic figure, but we can also guide the world in a way that the messianic figure is just another Bene Gesserit, right?
Right.
Yes, it'll be a man. That's what will make him the Kwisatz Haderach. That it'll be the first man to have our power.
Right.
But he'll be under our spell. And then
And
Jessica
then they're in
fucks everything
and then they're
up.
in charge.
And
of
then they're in
the
charge and they
universe.
can benevolently guide the universe is their hope.
Okay, I got you.
You know, what they think is benevolent is up for debate, right? But like that's their hope.
Sure.
And that, you know, Jessica fucks everything up by making a boy instead of a girl because she wants to.
And as
'Cause
Bene
she likes-
Gesserit, she can control her whole body on a cellular level.
That is correct.
And she loves
so-
Duke Leto, and he wanted a son.
Right. She's been told to make a daughter and that daughter will be bred with Fade Rautha and the product will supposedly be the Kwisatz Haderach. Instead, she makes a boy because, yes, she loves somebody.
Now, let me ask the listener, do you enjoy this kind of exposition?
Yes, you do. It's fun, right? And of course, in creating Paul, they create the imperfect Messiah, which I love.
Sure.
Like Paul is someone who has all the power that they dreamed of creating, right?
Right.
Perfect flush, by the way.
but he's
Perfect
not.
flush.
But when he's given it and when he then leads a holy army, you know, to run roughshod over the entire universe, he feels bad about it because
Sure.
he's a human being.
Yeah.
And he cannot reconcile the nightmare of what he's doing with the sort of like, but it is for the greater good.
Yeah.
Even though he has the brain power to be like, I've done all the math and I do think this is for the greater good. Like, this is the best worst option, right? Every other option, more people die.
He's Doctor Stranged it.
Right.
He's seen a million outcomes and he picked the least worst one.
And not to spoil the future Dune.
Attention. Attention. This is a spoiler alert for the 48-year-old novel Children of Dune.
But of course, the eventual thing is that his son, Leto II, Paul gives up. He's like, fuck this. I don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
And his son is like, I'll do it. The only way I can do it is by turning into a worm.
Sandworm.
And I will live for millennia and be kind of evil. Right. And I will basically take this burden onto myself in an inhuman way and it will destroy me.
He'll be the hero that the Duneverse needs.
The fourth book, God Emperor of Dune, is just Leto II is a sandworm.
David.
Yes.
I know. Go on.
I think we maybe shouldn't. No, because I think this is too many spoilers.
Spoilers for what? These are
You're telling people
books.
to read the fucking books, and now you're just telling everybody what happens in the fucking books.
Okay, well,
should they
put
read
a
them or
spoiler
should
warning
you do
on
the
it.
work?
Put a spoiler warning on it.
I am.
He becomes a worm, and the book is just him arguing with Duncan Idaho, where Duncan Idaho's like, you're a jerk. And he's like, yeah, I am a jerk. Duncan Idaho's like, well, that sucks. And he's like, yeah, that's fucking life. Tough cookies. It's the whole book. It rocks.
He says tough cookies?
He says tough cookies every chapter.
Yeah.
Wow. Every chapter ends with them saying like, and what else do I say? Tough cookies.
He's got a catchphrase. It's tough cookies.
End of spoilers.
The full phrase is tough cookies, numbnuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I read what JJ texted us?
Sure, if you want to.
JJ, while we were recording, texted David and I, hope the Dune dossier still made sense once you reached the deeper pages, LOL. In a way, writing that dossier was a lot like making Dune, parenthetical 1984. High hopes early on, good work to kick things off, eventually overwhelmed by the enormity of the book that was being adapted. If either of you ever writes an oral history, please, 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 please edit out some of the repeat statements. LOL. Well, JJ, you're fired.
Yeah, what is this in my hand? It's a pink slip.
This is the pinkest slip.
The sleeper must be fired. Is there anything else? We talked about the big blocky shields.
Well, now I want to look at the later pages of this dossier and see the messy
don't really
shit
know what
he's
he's talking
here's-
about.
here's
I think
the
he's
thing.
talking about how this moment that I tried to read out where he's like, this book is so long, let me try to summarize what it was about. The making of Dune book.
I have, having heard now a couple of times, Dune style, a couple of different plot synopses for the books to come that I've never read.
Right.
I still have no interest in reading them.
They're so good.
If you say that they're fun, but I mean, it's just like, I think that they reach a point of dementia where I feel like I'm not going to be along for the ride.
They definitely abandon the more traditional Peter Bergian boys' adventures stuff.
Right.
For more like, no, let's just go deeper into the philosophical implications and the world and all that stuff.
And I honestly, I think that the idea that Paul is an imperfect messiah who's actually made a choice to kill billions of people across the universe because that's the least worst outcome.
Right.
Is an interesting end to the novel Dune and to the Villeneuve Dune. I think it's fair play that it is not the end of the David Lynch Dune. I don't think there's any problem with that at all.
It's not in this movie.
No.
It would be weird if at the end he was like, and now I'm a messiah. You're like, I didn't see that coming at all.
But it's also fascinating that Villeneuve finally did crack the code on how to make Dune into a populist blockbuster.
Sure.
While making it very much a movie for grown-ups. It is sci-fi,
that is a movie
caviar.
he would make.
Yes.
It's not like a movie where you're like, Denis really selling himself out here. You're like, no, this is his
and
aesthetic.
he was just like, we have to accept what Dune is and do the Duniest version of Dune.
It's Dooney,
and there are certain things I will do to make this more penetrable for an audience.
Yeah.
But also this is a movie that does not care about kids at all. And that is dark and that is heady and everything.
Right.
Well,
it is.
I have to say,
there's no coloring books coming.
There's no coloring books. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You did text us earlier today, Hodgman. Pictures of the coloring book. You said, I don't know what happened to my coloring book. I think I might have lent it to someone.
A very kind listener to Judge John Hodgman, available every Wednesday at MaximumFun.org. And starting in a couple of days in Ann Arbor on tour this fall.
Cool.
Go find out, go search Judge John Hodgman tour and whatever search engine you like and find out and get tickets. If you please, it would be great to see you there. It's better when you're there. But And especially if you're the one who sent me the coloring book and the activity book for Dune, which I took pictures of and sent you some pictures. But I took the pictures a long time ago because I don't know what happened to them. I feel like I may have sent them.
And you
to
say you had
somebody.
trading cards as well, and you ate the gum.
I got trading cards as well.
Did the gum?
and
What
the
did the gum do? Make you see the future?
I was unconscious for 3 weeks as I journeyed to a place I'd never been before. When I woke up, I could be many places at once.
John, look at what I've had underneath my laptop this
no.
entire time.
Whoa.
For hours.
What?
Since you've been here, I've been keeping this under my fucking
The Dune
laptop
coloring and activity
for the
book.
on-mic reveal.
Thank you very much. Now, I didn't send it to you, did I? This isn't my copy.
No. I purchased
Oh, you
this.
picked this up. Wow.
We have an episode coming later in the series with David Lowery, who talked about Dune being a very big film for him and him having the coloring book and the picture book
Oh, wow.
when he was a child. And it made me want to track this down, which I was able to find for a good price and good condition. But it is, I would argue, the weirdest piece of Dune merch, if we can do a little merch spotlight here.
Yeah, merch spotlight.
Because like coloring books like this try to also like simplify the narrative.
Oh, sure. I
They're
mean,
giving you pages to color that have like the one sentence description of what that page is trying to
and
depict.
obviously, this is a very easy story to boil down into about 30 pages. And what do kids like to do when they're coloring more than color in their favorite characters and
Yes.
their horrible pustules and boils?
Yes.
You got to make sure, you get the right purple for all those boils.
Yeah. Yo, wowie, zowie. Relive all the excitement and adventure.
Remember when people didn't
From
have
the
phones and
movie
you had to relive
Dune.
shit in a coloring
Yeah.
book? Kind of rocks.
Or like we were the fucking special feature we were watching, they would sell different Dune read-along books where it either came with a 45 vinyl or cassette tape,
okay.
and you had a picture book and you'd play along,
Right.
someone narrated.
That sounds so stupid.
Yeah.
See if you can work as fast as Thufir, the human computer.
This is
How
what
many
I like.
words can you make from the letters in the boxes below? And then
Trying
it's
to
just word jumble.
gamify the movie we just watched into fun little puzzles for children.
I mean, I understand, obviously, the thinking of this is merch, the height of merch,
Yes.
right? Star Wars, He-Man.
Yeah.
We must have merch.
And Star Wars was the first film franchise
Yes.
that really,
right.
like, because it had always been a TV thing that got merged out that hard, by and large, up until that point. But yes, no, it is funny how confidently they went into this.
Well, someone had to do it. Do you know
Yep.
what I mean? I love this page.
I might debate that someone had.
No, someone
to
had
do
to
it.
do it.
Well, I
Someone
mean,
had to do it.
Someone got hired.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's
Someone
not.
got high,
Yeah.
too.
It's all right. Dune
Sandworm.
Coloring and Activity book
Mm.
by Arlene Block,
Okay.
illustrated by Michael Nicastra. Who's Arlene Block?
I don't know, looking up the name sounds kind of familiar.
I really feel for Arlene when she wrote the title of this page that just says, "What's with GD Prime?"
Well, I searched for her and I found her obituary.
Oh no,
R.I.P.
She died about a year ago. It seems like she wrote a lot of,
like tie-in stuff.
but also just kind of generic children's activity books and coloring books and such.
That's
I
cool.
Wrote a book called Will Ants Come?
I don't
Small and
begrudge her
large
this job,
reptiles.
and I feel bad for her that she had to do it.
I just want to call out the Making of Dune book that you brought in.
By Ed Naha,
Uh-huh.
novelizer of Ghostbusters 2.
Yes.
Mhm.
The dedication at the top of the book is for the ticket buyers.
Ah.
Wow.
The ticket buyers must awaken.
Just feels like a very funny thing to put in a book
I mean, thanks.
tied into a movie that ticket buyers didn't like.
There were a
Yeah.
few, though. A few
A
ticket
few.
buyers.
Yeah.
There were a handful out there. Ben,
What?
any thoughts?
The new Dune?
Mhm.
They got a monopoly.
They do. There's a
Of course they do.
Dunopoly. Yeah.
Dunopoly. that
That's
makes
just one of
perfect
those
sense.
things that takes 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
That's why there's always a new, because it's just like, okay, so just can you give me 20 properties?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. No further work is required.
We release a new Monopoly for every episode. That's how easy it is to map anything onto a Monopoly game.
And in the 90s, there were some computer games that
Those
were
are cool.
extremely
Oh, yes.
influential.
Those are influential strategy games,
Yeah.
like very influential, and they're cool. And Dune, it again, it
that's
sort of
a good
speaks ill.
fit.
That's
right.
good
It
fit.
speaks ill of Dune as a blockbuster. But
right.
you're like, what's it good for? A resource management sim.
Yeah.
Where you're
Yeah,
like mining spice.
Exactly.
Right. Like it was so ideal for that 90s genre of like top down strategy game. What has it been?
I'm looking
It's
at
also
the
a
board.
famous board game.
Yeah.
There's just free parking on the board.
That's my favorite thing.
Sure.
Some
Yeah.
of the Monopoly stuff is
or
like
an
required.
adopter parking, please.
Not even. It's just a little fucking cartoon car.
Sometimes they come
Awooga.
up with like a clever analog, and other times they're just like, it's just
Not
go
in
to
this case.
jail.
It's just
Like, go to
an
jail.
old-timey officer pointing, and it says
Yeah.
go to jail. They didn't even try.
And go to jail, it should be through how milking a cat.
It's
Yes.
so weird that in Monopoly, and I'm sure 1,000 stand-ups have done this joke, like there's one crime you can commit, which is landing in that square.
Yeah.
It's like you're going to jail. For what? The crime of landing here. Go to jail.
It's all kind of an anti-purge, right?
Right? It's like everything is legal,
everything
in
is
every
legal
square.
unless you're standing in one spot, and then existing is
Where
illegal.
the cop is like, jail, I
Yeah.
saw you.
Yeah.
I saw you.
If you take one wrong step, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're going straight to jail.
Okay, let's play the box office game unless there's anything else we want.
Well, so
yeah.
let me just.
Yeah, John.
Just
What's
one
Ben
little thing.
reacting to?
Oh, I hear something in the hallway. Vacuum.
It's like a David Lynchian.
I was going to say.
Every time Ben does something like that, I'm like, is there an
Is
elaborate
he
bit
setting
about to
something
play
up?
out?
No,
Yeah,
but
so-
this was just
The answer
genuine.
is
This was
one
a
of the-
found
someone's
it.
cleaning the carpet.
It's one of those third stage Guild Navigator vacuum cleaner guys out there.
Does David Lynch still have a sound credit on this movie? It is an interesting thing I want to just call out.
Going
that-
up.
Particularly in Eraserhead, it's getting really Lynchy in the hallway.
I love it.
Eraserhead
So
and
perfect.
Elephant Man, it is sound designed by David Lynch.
Which makes sense.
But there are, directors who are also their own DPs or their own editors, whether
he
under
is
their
credited
own
as
name.
he is credited as a sound designer, Griffin, on Eraserhead,
Mm.
The Elephant Man,
Mm.
not Dune,
Mm.
not
Dune.
Blue Velvet,
Okay.
not Wild at Heart, but Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me,
Yeah.
Lost Highway, The Straight Story, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire,
I just
and
cannot
Twin Peaks: The Return.
think of another director who also takes that credit other than maybe on their first film when they have a crew of 4 people and they have to multitask.
Right.
Where you're like, this is important. I need to do this.
How would he say it though?
Let me make the noises. I want to do the cling-clanging myself.
John, is there anything? Yes.
Well, I mean, so there were 2 more chapters to
Oh,
my
let's-
to my
let's do
epic,
those
and I'll,
2
and I'll
chapters.
just be very quick about them.
And
So
this is kind of, these take
I said
place
that
thousands of
stupid-
years in the future.
Yeah, I said
Yeah.
that stupid braggy thing about how I got this weird call saying, "Do you want to take a pass at a script for Peter Berg?" And I said
Yeah.
no, and I kind of feel self-conscious about that because I was never going to ever get anywhere near that.
Sure.
It was just where I was in that time of my career.
Sure.
And a couple of years after that, I was in LA to do some work, probably for Apple, and a director, a nerd director, said. He said, you like Dune, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, should I direct it? It's been offered to me.
Sure.
And I can't say who the person is.
You can tell us off mic.
Yeah, I'll tell you off mic.
Great.
Can
cool.
you say it right now and then we'll bleep it?
Interesting.
And I
feel
don't
like-
know. I don't know how fully. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you this story, and you bleep out the people. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So says that to me, and I say, no, I would stay away from it. It's unfilmable.
Right.
If I
Classic.
couldn't write a script for Peter Berg, you shouldn't have fun making a movie.
Yes.
But then I thought about it on the way back to the hotel where I was having dinner that night with a new friend
Mm.
who's a very prominent, very smart, very lovely nerd creator of things.
Mm.
Whose name I will not reveal on mic because I don't know if he likes the story being told.
Okay.
But his name is,
Mm-hmm.
Lovely.
and he's a wonderful guy, a wonderful creator.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something to me in that evening that has stayed with me ever since, which is that I was like, hey, this other person, your friend, just was like musing about whether he should make a new Dune. And I initially said, no, don't do it. It's unfilmable.
Right.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about it, other friend here with me at dinner. We should go ahead and tell him to direct it so that you and I can write it. And beyond that, we'll get all of our other nerd friends,
Yeah.
and we're going to take over a whole floor of this hotel and live for a year trying to crack the Dune code just like Leto tried to do. And we will fail, and we will be murdered, and we'll eat a gas tooth and die, but we'll have a great time doing
The
it.
sport of the exercise was suddenly what became appealing to you,
Absolutely.
not the idea that you could succeed.
But then nothing came of this.
Well, no, my friend who I was having dinner with said,
Sure.
I will not do it.
Right. Saw the trouble. In
And I said,
trying
why? It's just fun. And he said, no. He said, we create science fiction and fantasy. That's our world.
Mhm.
And it's sort of including me graciously in that.
Right,
It's not my
right.
world.
Obviously, it's something.
But you know what I mean?
he
Like
You
I'm
were a
adjacent.
PC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a PC.
Yeah.
And he said,
He-
and this was probably 2011, right? So,
Mhm.
This is around when Paramount is dropping the project, and it's kind of like
It's back
what's
in
going to
play.
happen, right?
Yeah.
but I mean, almost a decade and a half ago.
Yes.
And already this friend of mine was like, everything that is being made is a reimagining, a reboot,
Sure.
a relaunch, a sequel, or
Yeah.
whatever. And that's fine. But as people who are involved in science fiction, our job is to think of the new.
We have to make new
We
things.
We have to make
If you
new
have the
things.
ability to create, you shouldn't be going back to other people's stuff.
Like we
Yeah.
should be creating and the implication was like what Frank Herbert did, which is like do a lot of mushrooms, get fascinated with the history of resistance in the Caucasus Wars in the mid-19th century, become obsessed with the oil crisis
Yes,
and the
also
Oregon dunes.
I was about to say also Oregon's sand dunes.
Right.
Yes.
Mishmash that up into something that will make young John Hodgman, 13 years old, confused and uncomfortable in a theater. That's our job.
Delay him talking to women for another couple of years.
Exactly so.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, and it's like, yeah, who do you think my favorite character was in that movie? The Sandworms? No. Third Stage Guild Navigator. Weird only child floating around in a tank, never has to touch a person.
You will do as I say.
That was my guy. That was my guy
That makes
forever.
sense. That checks out. Yeah.
And I was just so, he was so right. And I was so taken by that. And I thought about it very deeply. Now, it turns out this wonderful guy didn't end up doing some work on the script for the new Dune.
Okay.
Like he totally turned around and did
Right.
it. I mean, a decade
But
later.
not his project as much.
No.
Right.
No.
It was just a gig.
And, the sentiment is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just this moment of feeling like, oh, right, this is the lesson, right?
Yeah.
The lesson of Dune is the sleeper must awaken. We have to, I mean, it's the Jürgen Prochnow monologue. It's like, if we don't do new things, we fall asleep. And I know, I'm sorry, David. And so
start doing
boy.
something new.
it was a big life lesson. And then fast forward to 2021.
Natalie Portman.
Yeah. Oh,
I
good.
don't know how
Yeah,
much he
that's
contributed. I don't know what he contributed to this movie or how much it showed up
Yeah.
on screen, but I went to go see it at the IMAX. And of course, I saw it with Tim McGonigal, the guy I saw it with when we were 13
That's
years
nice.
old. And it was a profound vindication. We got to finally see everything that,
Yeah.
and, but at the same time, like I'm haunted by how sad David Lynch is about this.
Yeah.
No, I don't like that he's sad about it. I did see there's one interview where he expressed the mildest interest in like maybe looking at all the footage again.
Right. 'cause that
In
was
this
the
notion
thing.
of like,
Yeah.
hey,
Right.
would you ever want to try and like reassemble your cuts?
The whole thing with the TV cut was that like
That's not a real thing, right?
no,
That's
years
like,
of him disowning it. They were like, well, what if we tried to reconstruct your version?
Yeah.
He's like, there is no my version because I felt compromised while I was on set. So there's no version of it that's going to accurately represent what I
Right.
felt like I wanted to do. So if you're doing this, you're doing this without me.
And he just had this general kind of like, I don't want to talk
I'm
about
done.
Dune. Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, you describe how he felt like he was dying during the edit.
sure.
And I think that there's a way to read that, and it may be, I mean, you have to take him at his word, right? That it's just like, I sold out.
Yeah.
I compromised. I'll never do it again, everything else. But there was a thing in,
I was playing the game in a way I did not ever do again in my career.
well, right. And
Right.
also, but there was a thing that in this book, The Masterpiece in Disarray, that I learned, like there were, once they started to cut back, right? There was going to be a scene that they end up filming but cutting, where Paul and Leto and Jessica walk through the streets of Arrakeen, the city in
Sure.
Arrakis, also known as Dune, also known as Desert Planet. And they had all the costume designs. I think Bob Ringwood did the costume designs. They're so incredible. And some milliner made 1,000 Fremen hats for the 1,000 extras who were going to be in this scene. And then they had to cut the extras down to 200, and they ended up only seeing 12. And the 1,000 hats were burned.
Jesus.
That's classic movie making.
1,000 made hats. And when you think about when they were in Mexico together, there were ups and downs to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't sound like it was an awful situation. And it was this incredible collection
Right.
of craftspeople.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like truly
Doing
talented.
really cool work.
On screen and off screen.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, to do the best you could to make what you could and then have it be so completely reviled. People people ate so much lunch.
Yes.
So much angry, contemptuous lunch on his dime with this. Just yelling about how terrible it was. And obviously it was rejected by audiences as well at the time. I can understand why when you've brought in all these people
Yes.
and they're relying on you and then you let them down, it's got to feel awful. So I just want David Lynch to know
It's okay.
you did the movie really actually connects with people in a weird way.
Thanks,
and I'm one of
John.
them. And would, look, I don't use Twitter anymore, but when you
Smart.
stopped following me because you were a Bernie person and I voted for Hillary, I'd really like you to come back and it would be like,
Rejoin.
Can we
Yeah.
make, you never, perhaps I'm unforgivable for that, but I hope that we can, I just want you to know I really like you, David Lynch.
He does get so many of his greatest collaborators from this experience, and this does feel like, I mean, it's what we were sort of saying at the beginning of the episode of it being his ultimate bounce, where it's like this kind of thing we're fascinated by on this show, which is like the movie that changes someone permanently.
Yeah.
And like if this movie had been even marginally more successful, David Lynch's career probably would be significantly less interesting.
Fair enough.
In the same way where like even the version of him just accepting the sort of like I'm the co-driver or the backseat driver on Return of the Jedi, having a movie be that level of hit for him would have given us a less interesting following 30 years of David Lynch.
Yeah.
You know? And he said like he had a 3-picture deal for this. He wrote half of the sequel.
Yeah.
As much as he had a difficult experience,
right.
if this has been a hit, he would have kept doing it.
He thinks so. I mean, like, obviously, who knows? But he says, right.
And a lot of like our, favorite filmmakers, the people we've covered on this show, they have this defining moment where it's like learning exactly what they never want to do ever again.
Right.
Right.
But
You
I mean,
learn
it's like,
less from your successes because then you become a little freaked out on how to replicate it versus the failures where you go, great, I can roll that out forever now.
and, I just feel like how bad it must feel to be like in David Lynch's head and be like, I don't understand it. I gave them the cat taped to the rat.
Right.
And people didn't like it. And then eventually people realized they liked the cat taped to the rat.
Yeah.
They like the weird stuff.
They like the weird stuff. And he figures out how to build entire movies out of the weird stuff.
Yes.
terrific.
I think the Villeneuve movie helps the Lynch movie in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
In that it's like, okay, now you have a sort of fairly straightforward adaptation. Even the Sci-Fi Channel thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you want Dune, go see Dune.
Yeah.
Now you have
Yes.
David Lynch's Dune
Takes
as this
the pressure
special
off.
object.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's flawed.
It's not seen as this like
It's like that's the only
ultimate
time they tried to do Dune.
ultimate artistic failure.
The lack of
that
pressure
killed the thing or
on
whatever.
any weird production of Macbeth where you're like, well, isn't the assignment to reinterpret it and do something personal with it?
Sure.
Right.
It's not the only one that's ever going to be made. It just
Dune.
took a couple decades for there to be
Dune.
the weight taken off.
And
of
I
David
love the
Lynch's Dune.
Villeneuve movies
Yeah,
a
they're
lot.
great.
I think they're
Yeah.
terrific.
I love them so much.
Yeah.
I think they're great.
In fact, I wish that they were a lot longer. Just give me that all day long. I'd just watch it all day
Me
long.
too. I would fucking watch 18 million hours of that shit.
Well, don't worry.
But where the
fucking
fuck is my
12
third
hours-
stage guild navigator? You can't
That's
5
true.
hours. You can't give me one peek at this dude.
I agree.
My
Get-
friend.
10 hours of the HBO Max series coming? Done
Yes, I mean I don't know how much Denis directed that, but I'm very excited
It's
for
his
that.
world.
It
It's
looks
his-
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right, box office game. We
All
played
right.
it before, Griffin, but you may not
Wow.
remember it. December
December
14th,
84.
1984.
Okay.
Dune is opening number 2 at the box office to $6 million.
Ouch.
It's not great.
Wow,
Good,
exactly.
good.
Makes it to
Yeah.
27 domestic. There's not
Really
really
bad.
international take listed here. I'm sure it did okay internationally. So obviously an underwhelming film.
Sure.
Financially.
Mhm.
Number 1 is a big hit that we just covered on this podcast, and it came out the week prior.
Main feed or Patreon?
Main feed.
We just covered it. It is called Beverly Hills Cop.
That's right.
Never
That's
seen
right.
it.
Is that true?
Never seen a single Beverly Hills Cop.
Wow.
Clearly, you've never been to Beverly Hills, then.
Yeah.
There you
Or
go.
if you went there, you didn't understand how to interact with people. You had no guide to follow.
No, well, I was floating in my tank full of gas at the time.
I would
so
check out
I didn't-
Beverly Hills Cop. It's a very
Yeah.
entertaining film.
Yeah.
I don't know why I never did. I just never did.
Yeah, it is just it is one of the most astonishing time capsules of movie stardom.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like reading a lot of the letterbox logs and such of the episode we did, and listeners of this show who had never watched Beverly Hills Cop before are just like, Jesus Christ, this is the most like off the charts charisma.
Yeah.
This is just a guy fully coming into his power who is fucking unstoppable.
Number 3 at the box office is a film. I mean,
Talking about Eddie Murphy we're talking about?
George Reinhold.
Right.
David, number 3 at the box office?
We talked about it last week, I think, or last time we did Beverly Hills Cop, because it's just a week later. It's a buddy cop. No, but not buddy cop. Buddy
You say
crime.
last week because the episode just came out last week. It will have been the fucking 87
You
months.
understand.
Yeah, I get
You
it.
understand. It's a buddy crime movie with 2 gigantic stars that was a flop.
Oh, it's City Heat?
City Heat.
Okay.
City
Clint
Heat.
Eastwood and Burt Reynolds.
Oh, yeah. A period piece,
Yeah,
right?
it's back in the old days in the 30s when
Prohibition,
you had a gun.
gangster. Yeah.
Hey, get out of here. Right. I need some booze.
Back in the 30s when you had a gun.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Number 4 at the box office is a sci-fi sequel. We've covered it on this podcast.
We've covered it on this podcast. In the year of 1984. Sci-fi sequel.
We talked about it, I believe, in the Beverly Hills Cop episode.
We talked about
Briefly.
it in the fucking Beverly Hills Cop episode.
Oh.
You got
I
it?
know what it is.
What is it?
Is this part of a major science fiction franchise?
It is a sequel to a major science fiction film, but it is the last in the quote-unquote franchise.
Then I know what it is.
What is it?
Is it 2010?
It is. What did you
right.
think it was?
Wrath of Khan, maybe.
Also a great guess.
But this
but
was
no,
the Search for Spock year.
It is the Search for
right.
Spock year. That's
Right,
true, because
right.
Nighthawk's playing it tonight. Because they're doing a 1984 series.
Okay.
But this is 2010, the year we make contact.
Mm.
Peter Hyams' film.
Roy Scheider, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
John Lithgow, Helen Mirren, Balaban.
Those are pretty wildly different takes.
Balaban.
Balaban.
Big
All right,
studio
I'm in
sci-fi occupying theaters at the same time.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Not a bad movie. We discussed it on this show. It's pretty watchable.
Yeah.
That
So
was one of
it's-
those
it's-
movies that they made during that time when they made movies just because they kind of had
They
to.
kind of just got to keep making
You
movies.
just kind of got to, you got to make it 2010.
We're not going to stop.
Because Arthur C. Clarke had come out with a 2010
had.
novel.
Right.
There was something
So
for them
it's
to
like,
work off
now we gotta, the same thing like the movie 1984. Like it was 1984.
That was truly a film they made because like they
It
were
was
like,
the year.
someone's
It was the
going to
year.
fucking
Yeah.
make one of these,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, see, versus
and
it's-
and you know what they did? They really made a movie out of 1984. It was the first R-rated movie I ever saw,
wow.
and it was the most depressing, appropriately the most depressing
It's
thing
a
I've ever
depressing
seen.
film. yeah.
It's like a really good movie of a movie that shouldn't exist.
A really good snapshot of what you were saying, the old business model that Hollywood studios used to follow versus now where they've been experimenting with this idea of what if we don't make movies?
What if we don't make anything ever?
Right. And it's like, then what do you put in theaters? And they're like, hear me out.
Yeah.
Nothing.
But
Nothing.
then we're going to complain when there's not
A
enough
lot.
box office.
We're going to be really upset.
Number 5 at the box office is another mega flop of the era from a great director. It's new this week. It's opening to $3 million. This director has a film out this year in theaters.
It's a Coppola?
It's a Francis Ford Coppola
Is it
film.
One from the Heart?
No.
Is it?
80s flop by Francis Ford Coppola. There are so many answers to this.
84.
84.
Mega flop.
He recently recut a new
Oh, it's
version of
Cotton
it.
Club.
I was going to say that's not really a good clue,
No.
but it is The
It
Cotton
narrowed
Club.
it down to one of
Oh.
8 movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
With Richard Gere and
Fred Gwynn and Bob Hoskins.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I
Gregory Hines.
And
Gregory Hines.
Tom
yes.
Waits is in it too,
Yeah.
I believe.
I have seen it. Pretty interesting.
I
Not
have-
entirely
I have not seen the new
successful.
cut.
I'd like to
Which
see the new
people
cut.
I had the soundtrack on cassette and I would listen to it as a weird only child. That
I
would
was
be
gonna
my
say,
makes a
you
ton
listen
That was
to
what I
your-
listened to as I was getting ready for high school.
your jazz music.
I have heard that of the Coppola recuts, that is the one that is most effectively transformative.
Right. The others, you're kind of like, he has interesting ideas and he's
Right.
putting interesting stuff
Or
in
the one
here.
from the Heart Redux, I would argue, actually makes the film worse.
I think the Apocalypse Now Redux makes it way worse.
It does, but the one from the Heart one is making a movie
It's
that
right, you're
already didn't work worse.
Bringing a 5-star to 4.5
Right.
is
Versus
less
Apocalypse
damaging.
Now, it's like,
right.
this is an interesting alternate version. We can all agree the other
Where-
one's a masterpiece.
Right.
What is this Cotton Club?
It's called Encore.
Yeah,
The
you know.
last 10 years
He
in
keeps
the
recutting
lead
his
up
movies.
to Megalopolis, when it felt like Francis Ford Coppola is trying to sort of close the book on his whole career. He's gone back to almost all of his maligned films
He did
and
it
done
with
radical recuts.
Tucker.
He did
He
Tucker,
did the new Godfather 3.
right? The Death of Michael Corleone,
Right.
Godfather Coda. He did
That I remember. I just never
Yes.
heard of the Cotton Club one. When
yeah,
when did
it
that
got
happen?
a limited
A year or
theatrical
two ago.
release,
Yeah.
and it is now.
Have you
now
seen
available on
Megalopolis?
streaming. I have not. I'm dying to see it.
I'm going to wait for the Redux.
Number 6 at the box office is
Ben,
Starman.
I set that one up. Did you hear me set that one up?
Ben, did you hear him set that one up?
I set it up.
The reason we've done this before is because number 6 is Starman, but I have no memory of doing this box office game because those were crazy times.
Wow.
Yeah. But another interesting analog to like where sci-fi filmmaking is at, where like Carpenter's very political and is very rooted in reality.
Number 7 is a sci-fi film, Runaway, the Tom Selleck movie directed by
Crichton.
Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
Yeah. Villain
About,
played by Gene Simmons.
Yes, robots, I think. And number 8 also has robots. It's The Terminator.
Oh.
And then number 9 is the film Falling in Love.
The De Niro. No.
It is De Niro, isn't it? De Niro,
De Niro
and
and
Streep.
Streep?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
The first time they
And number 10 is Missing in Action, the Chuck
appeared
Norris
together,
film.
No, because they
No.
had done Deer Hunter.
Deer Hunter, right?
Deer
it was their
Hunter.
reunion. It was a big
Yes,
deal.
It was a big
I remember
deal.
that.
And they were falling in love, a thing that at that point in time had not really
Never
been.
had
Never
happened
seen it
before.
on film.
No,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like Dune, where people went like,
What-
"You're
what is
really
that?
going to
What?
take this on?"
Someone
The
got the
sheer-
rights to Falling in Love?
Jesus cock, the audacity.
The concept of?
Jesus cock.
Ben,
I'm
you're
sorry
leaning
that I
in.
said that. It's really, I don't work that
No, I
blue
think it's
typically.
good.
and
I think it's really good.
it's left
Are you
to-
leaning in to tell us it's time to be done?
End the episode.
Okay. He did
the voice.
It was well played.
We didn't mention that they have sound weapons in this movie because David Lynch decided desert kung fu would be too weird and he didn't want to show the weirding way. So instead they have boxes that go, yes.
They have weirding gloves.
Weirding
which-
modules.
Yes, which it's not like that makes more
It's like
sense.
you wear an Xbox headset,
Yeah.
It does
and then
feel
you put, and then it connects to a box that you hold in your hand.
Yeah. And
And then you say a word, and then it shoots sound.
I'm sure the LJN Toy Company, who are already far along in their action figure line equipped with Battlematic action, were really excited when they heard that David Lynch took out all the fighting.
It's just weird that he's like, I don't like the kung fu. And it's like, there's still lots of kung fu in this movie, basically. There's a lot of people punching each other and shit.
Yeah.
Anyway. And also there's a 6-year-old girl walking around being like, hello, how are you? You know, it's like, yeah. I mean, she's cool.
is the Kwisatz Haderach?
I mean, at that point, there's 2 people left in the theater,
Yes.
right? Yes. And they're loving it.
They're loving it.
That's why.
Me and,
Or if they weren't,
me and Tim McGonigal.
they'd get back around to it decades later. It'd grow.
And it grows on you.
Yeah.
Dune.
John, thank you for being here.
Thank you for
As
inviting
always.
me.
It was one of those obvious Lynch wins our March Madness, and then we were just, I think we typed it in to our spreadsheet before we even asked you.
Oh, I forgot to tell you.
Oh?
No, that was just my reference to Virginia Madsen. What if I started another hour of material?
We almost successfully set up everything for this episode, but let me circle back. I forgot the last
It
chunk
was
of stuff.
it was very intimidating to confront all of my feelings about Dune and to awaken that sleeper, and also to think about all of the things that have been come up around. I mean, it's like obviously there are these activity books, but people are fascinated. These books about the making of Dune, I think, are quite good and interesting. And anyway,
Yeah, I agree.
I did my best.
Hey, you
did
best.
great.
Hey,
You did a
thanks.
great job.
Good to see you both.
Always a pleasure.
All 3 of you, I should dare say.
Well,
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Jesus, cock, that was a
see you.
close one.
You
I know.
almost didn't get a friendly's hat. You were this close.
I know I was going to get an enemy's hat.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. The Lynchian vacuuming is once again returned outside our office.
Oh, I forgot to tell you. Judge John Hodgman's going on tour.
What?
We're going Ann Arbor, Madison,
That's certainly not the
Minneapolis, St.
Northeast at
Paul.
all. You're not going to hit. no.
Portland, Maine, Burlington, Vermont, Turners Falls, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. If I've forgotten any, you can correct me by going in your search bar and searching Judge John Hodgman on tour, where you can probably get tickets as well, and it would be lovely to see you there. Sorry about that. I forgot to tell you, Virginia Madsen style.
Look in the episode
Oh,
description.
look
There'll
at
be
that.
a link to the tour dates.
Hey, look in the episode description.
Look in the episode description.
Yeah.
Thank you to Marie Barty for helping to produce the show. AJ McKeon for editing, bleeping out all the names. David's in the bathroom. Ben's is pointing over.
Coward. Should have peed his pants.
He fucking should have peed and pooed in his pants.
I know. Let it be processed in the thigh pads.
Thank you to JJ Birch for being fired. It's been a great run of doing research up until this point, but God, was that dossier unacceptable. Or kidding, they're rehired. Thank you to Joe Bowen, Pat Reynolds for our artwork, Lane Montgomery, The Great American Novel for our theme song. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon Blank Check special features, where we do commentaries on film series and other sort of bonus stuff we're doing. a Lynch short films episode, and we're doing our tabletop games around this time. We'll be doing Battleship and Ouija. Battleship and Ouija.
Peter Berg's Battleship?
Yes. Look at that.
Look at that.
Tune in next week for Blue Velvet with Jamie Loftus.
Oh, one of the greatest.
One of the greats.
I'll be listening.
Yes.
Good.
Good.
And,
I hope you do.
And as always, you know what's better than doing a podcast on Dune?
No.
Dune 2 podcasts at the same time.
I'm going to color in this coloring book now.
It's me doing Lynchian ambient droning.
Uh-huh.
And you can layer that in over the whole episode, Ben? Nope. Ready? Put that at the end. Here's the episode.